Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. Have you ever felt watched? Every morning, as I ride the bus to work, I pass by the same abandoned house. It stands alone at the corner, its paint peeling and windows cracked, a relic of a time long forgotten. I often wonder about its past, the stories hidden within its walls, but I never stop. I simply look away, lost in my thoughts as the bus rattles by. But one morning, something changed. As I glanced out the window, I caught a glimpse of a silhouette in the upper window. It was fleeting, just a shadow, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I blinked, convinced my mind was playing tricks on me. The house had been empty for years. I shook off the unease, blaming it on the lack of sleep. When I arrived at work, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message read, "Why don't you notice me?" I stared at the screen, confusion washing over me. My mind raced, trying to piece together the sudden strangeness of the morning. Had someone seen me look at the house? My heart began to race, and an unsettling feeling settled deep in my gut. I dismissed the message as a prank, but the unease lingered. The rest of the day dragged on, the message replaying in my mind like a haunting echo. Who would send such a thing? I tried to focus on work, but every time I glanced out the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As the days went by, I continued to pass by that house, each time more apprehensive than the last. I often thought about that silhouette, wondering if I had imagined it. But then, another text came the following morning. "I see you. Why won't you see me?" A cold sweat broke out on my skin. It felt like a threat wrapped in a question. My heart raced, and I fought the urge to look out the bus window. What if I saw it again? What if it was waiting for me? The bus ride became an ordeal. Each time I approached the familiar corner, dread knotted in my stomach. I could sense the anticipation in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. That weekend, curiosity gnawed at me. I decided to walk by the house after a long day at work. The sun was setting, casting eerie shadows that danced across the yard. The air felt heavy, thick with an inexplicable tension. As I approached, I noticed details I had overlooked before. The grass was overgrown, and the fence leaned precariously to one side. I could see through the cracked windows, and the darkness inside seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible. "You're closer now." I froze, heart pounding. Was I imagining things? Or was something really there? I turned to leave, but something compelled me to take a step closer. My breath quickened as I peered into one of the windows, feeling a pull I couldn't resist. For a moment, I was met with darkness, but then my eyes adjusted. There it was again, a silhouette, this time clearer. A figure stood just inside the window, watching me. I stumbled back, gasping as fear coursed through me. I whipped around to flee, but a loud creak echoed from the house, followed by a whisper, "Why won't you notice me?" I ran. The world blurred around me as I sprinted away, the weight of unseen eyes pressing heavily on my back. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my apartment. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, heart racing, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the figure in the window and the chilling messages. I had opened a door to something I didn't understand, and I feared what would happen next. As the hours crawled by, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something wanted my attention, and each time I looked away, it seemed to grow closer. Have you ever felt like you're being drawn into a trap? The following morning, I resolved to ignore the house entirely. As the bus approached the familiar corner, I focused intently on my phone, pretending I had an urgent message to read. But the unease remained, a palpable tension in the air that made my skin crawl. When I reached the office, the unknown number buzzed again. "Ignoring me won't make me go away," it read. I slammed my phone down on my desk, frustration boiling over. What was this? A sick joke? Throughout the day, I found it hard to concentrate. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, waiting for a moment of weakness. I imagined the figure in the window, its eyes boring into me, a silent plea for acknowledgement. That evening, after another agonizing day at work, I decided I had to confront this. I needed answers. What was the connection between the house and the strange messages? Why was I being targeted? I arrived at the house just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Shadows stretched long across the yard, making the old structure loom larger than life. My heart raced as I stepped closer, determination fueling my fear. I would find out what was going on. As I stood in front of the porch, the air shifted. A cool breeze swept through, rustling the overgrown grass. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and approached the front door. It creaked ominously as I pushed it open, the darkness inside swallowing me whole. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing in the stillness. Silence answered me, heavy and oppressive. I took a hesitant step inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. Dust motes danced in the fading light, creating an ethereal atmosphere that felt otherworldly. With each step, I could feel the tension thickening, as if the house itself were alive and watching. I peered into the adjacent rooms, shadows lurking in the corners, but nothing stirred. Then, from the depths of the house, I heard it again. A whisper, faint but clear, "You're here." I whipped around, heart pounding, but found no one. "Who are you?" I shouted into the darkness, desperation creeping into my voice. "Why don't you see me?" the voice echoed back, more insistent now. Chills ran down my spine. It felt as if the walls were closing in on me, suffocating. I turned to leave, but felt an overwhelming urge to stay. "Show yourself," I demanded, stepping further into the house. As I ventured deeper, the whispers grew louder, surrounding me. The air thickened with an inexplicable energy, and suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I spun around to see a shadow dart across the wall, too quick to discern. "Stop!" I yelled, terror clawing at my throat. And then I saw it, a figure materializing in the dim light, its outline barely discernible but undeniably present. It stood at the far end of the hallway, watching me. I could make out the shape of a face, gaunt and hollow, eyes dark as night. "Why won't you acknowledge me?" it asked, voice echoing with a haunting quality that resonated deep within my bones. I felt frozen, paralyzed by fear. "What do you want?" "I want you to see," it replied, a hint of sadness in its tone. "You ignore me, yet I've been waiting. I need your help." My heart raced as I processed the words. This being, whatever it was, felt desperate. "Help?" I echoed, confusion mixing with fear. "Yes," it pleaded. "This house holds secrets. I am trapped here, Forgotten? You're the first to notice me in years. I shook my head, backing away. I didn't notice you. I saw a shadow. I don't know what you want. Do you want to leave? It asked, stepping closer. The air grew colder, and I felt an intense pull towards it. You must confront the truth. Suddenly, the walls began to vibrate, and the shadows twisted and danced. I stumbled back, fear overwhelming me. I turned to flee, sprinting down the hallway, desperate to escape the darkness closing in. But the whispers followed me, echoing in my mind. You can't run from what you've ignored, they taunted. I burst out of the front door, gasping for breath as the cool night air hit me. I felt a strange emptiness inside, a void that was now tainted with the knowledge that I couldn't escape whatever this was. As I stumbled away from the house, my phone buzzed again. Why do you run? You need to know. The fear gripped me anew, but so did a lingering curiosity. I had only scratched the surface of something deep and dark, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Have you ever felt a connection to something beyond your understanding? The next day, I couldn't shake the unease. The shadows of the house haunted me, and the whispers echoed in my mind. I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to that figure, its hollow eyes and desperate voice. Why did it want my help? What truth was it hiding? As the day dragged on, I found myself glancing at my phone, half expecting another message. I didn't want to engage, yet part of me was drawn to the mystery, a moth to a flame. When the familiar buzz finally came, I hesitated before reading it. You can't ignore your fears forever. Meet me tonight. Panic surged through me. The message felt like a command, not a request. I should have deleted it, but curiosity rooted me in place. My mind raced with possibilities. What if I went back? What if I found answers? By evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a shroud of darkness in its wake. I fought with myself, pacing my apartment, trying to muster the courage to return to the house. The air was thick with tension as the shadows deepened outside, mirroring my growing dread. Finally, I made my decision. I had to confront whatever this was. I couldn't let fear control me. As I approached the house, the chill in the air intensified, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. I hesitated at the front door, taking a deep breath before pushing it open. The creak echoed through the empty space, almost like a warning. Hello? I called, my voice trembling. Welcome back, the voice replied, a hint of relief lacing its tone. You're finally here to listen. I stepped inside, the familiar shadows surrounding me. The atmosphere felt charged, alive with anticipation. I wanted to back away, but something compelled me to move forward. Why are you here? I asked, my voice steadying slightly despite my racing heart. What do you want from me? I am bound to this place, the figure explained, emerging from the shadows. Its form was clearer now, a gaunt figure dressed in tattered clothes, eyes dark and hollow. Long ago, I was forgotten, left to linger in the darkness. You noticed me, you're my chance for freedom. Freedom? I echoed, confusion swirling in my mind. How can I help you? You must uncover the truth hidden within these walls, it urged. There is a reason I am here, a reason I cannot leave. I felt a shiver run down my spine. What truth? The secrets of my past, the memories that bind me. You must find them, it insisted, its voice rising with urgency. I cannot remember on my own. You have to help me remember. An overwhelming sensation washed over me, a mixture of fear and empathy. I was being drawn into something I didn't fully understand, yet I couldn't turn away. How do I find these memories? Look for the letters, it replied, gesturing towards the back of the house. They are hidden. Only then will you understand. With a trembling breath, I followed its lead, moving deeper into the house. The darkness pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. I opened doors, searching for anything that could hold a clue. In one room, I found nothing but dust and decay, but in another, I noticed a faint glimmer beneath the floorboards. My heart raced as I knelt to examine it, pulling away splintered wood to reveal a small, dusty box. I pried it open, revealing a stack of old letters, yellowed with age. My hands shook as I picked one up, the familiar handwriting sending a chill through me. It was addressed to someone named Margaret. As I unfolded the first letter, the figure's voice filled my mind, echoing around me. Read them. I began to read, each word a glimpse into a forgotten life. The letters spoke of love and loss, of promises made and broken. They painted a picture of a life that had once been vibrant but had faded into shadow. Tears pricked at my eyes as I turned the pages, the emotions woven into the words tugging at my heart. I felt the weight of the figure's sorrow, the loneliness it had endured. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the room, rattling the letters from my grasp. They scattered across the floor, and the figure's voice grew frantic. You must finish. Don't let it slip away. I scrambled to collect the letters, heart pounding. But as I did, I noticed something else, a darkness creeping along the walls, a swirling mist that seemed to pulse with malevolence. What is that? I gasped, fear consuming me. It's the memories I've lost, the figure cried, its voice rising in pitch. They're trying to keep me here. I pushed through my fear, clutching the letters tightly. What do I do? Finish the story, it urged, desperation clear in its voice. Only then will I be free. With shaking hands, I continued to read, but the shadows grew heavier, the air thick with an oppressive weight. The whispers turned into shrieks, a cacophony of voices clawing at my mind. Help me, the figure pleaded, its form flickering. You're the only one who can break the curse. As I read the final letter, the darkness surged around me, and I felt myself being pulled into the chaos. I believe in you, I shouted, forcing myself to read the last words. With that, a blinding light erupted from the letters, pushing back the shadows. The figure let out a wail, its form illuminating the room. I felt a rush of energy, and for a moment, everything stood still. Then, silence. The light faded, and the room fell back into darkness. I stood alone, breathless and trembling, surrounded by scattered letters. The figure was gone, but the weight of its presence lingered in the air, a promise fulfilled. I realized then that I had not only helped it find peace, I had confronted my own fears. But as I turned to leave, the whispers returned, softer but unmistakable. You saw me, but will you remember? The question hung in the air, a chilling reminder that the connection we shared was not truly severed. I stepped outside, feeling the cool night air wash over me. The house loomed behind me, quiet now, but the echoes of its secrets still reverberated in my mind. Have you ever felt a weight lift, only to realize something else remains? The days that followed were unsettling. I returned to my routine, but the remnants of that encounter lingered like an unshakable shadow. The house at the bus stop felt different now, less like an abandoned structure and more like a memory I couldn't escape. I often glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure watching me from the window, but it never appeared. One evening, while I sat at home with a cup of tea, my phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. A new message flashed across the screen. You did well, but it's not over. A chill ran down my spine. The words stirred something deep within me, a realization that the connection we had forged was still alive. I hadn't just helped the figure, I had opened a door, one that could lead to unforeseen consequences. Who are you? I typed back, my fingers trembling. The reply came almost immediately. I am a part of you now. Our stories are entwined. Panic clawed at my throat. This was no ordinary interaction. I had stepped into a world where the lines between reality and the unknown blurred dangerously. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, shadows dancing across my walls, echoing my rising anxiety. Every creak in the floorboards felt amplified, and the wind howled outside like a mournful spirit. I could hear whispers in the distance, as if the house was calling out to me, urging me to return. Finally, I could take it no longer. I had to go back. As I approached the house, the streetlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the pavement. I hesitated, doubt creeping in, but I pressed forward, drawn by an unseen force. The door creaked open, and a familiar chill swept over me. Inside, the air was thick with a sense of expectation. The letters lay scattered on the floor, a testament to the encounter we'd shared. I felt a pull towards them, a need to understand what had been left unsaid. I knelt down, gathering the letters again. As I read, the words ignited feelings of longing and sorrow, but there was something else, an undercurrent of urgency. You need to remember, I whispered to myself, trying to make sense of it all. Suddenly, a rustling sound interrupted my thoughts. I froze, heart pounding. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a shadow flickering at the edge of my vision. Is anyone there? I called out, voice wavering. Silence answered. But then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, soft but deliberate, approaching from the darkness. I stood up, clutching the letters to my chest. Show yourself, I demanded, a mix of fear and defiance rising within me. The figure emerged from the shadows, but it was different this time. It looked more solid, more desperate. You have to help me remember, it urged, voice trembling. What do you mean? I asked, my pulse racing. I thought I helped you. No, it replied, eyes wide with urgency. You only scratched the surface. There's more to uncover, more to remember. You must dig deeper. I felt a surge of determination. How do I do that? Follow the whispers, it said, its form flickering with intensity. They will guide you to the truth. Only then can I be free. With a nod, I steeled myself and moved towards the back of the house. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a tempest. I could almost decipher words, fragments of thoughts pulling me in different directions. I stepped into a small room at the end of the hallway, its walls lined with old photographs. As I scanned the images, the whispers reached a fever pitch. I felt memories, not just of the figure, but of the lives lived within these walls. Each face told a story of joy and sorrow, a tapestry woven from moments of laughter, love, and loss. One photograph caught my eye, two people standing in front of the house, arms wrapped around each other. They looked so alive, so vibrant. A name echoed in my mind, Margaret. Margaret, I whispered, the name tasting like a distant memory. Is that you? The figure stepped closer, its expression shifting from desperation to something resembling hope. Yes, she was my light. But she was taken from me. Taken? I repeated, the weight of the revelation settling heavily on my chest. I lost her that night, it said, voice thick with grief. The night the shadows came for us both. As I pieced together the narrative, the whispers transformed into a chorus, revealing the tragic end of a love story. The couple had fought against the darkness, but it had consumed them. You need to remember what happened that night, the figure insisted. Only then can we both find peace. The air around me shifted, and I felt an overwhelming urge to uncover the truth buried deep within these walls. What happened? I asked, feeling the fear rise again. The house remembers, it urged, pointing towards the floor. You must dig. Without hesitation, I dropped to my knees, my fingers brushing the dust-laden floor. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I scraped at the surface, revealing a loose board. With a forceful tug, I pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside lay a small, ornate box, the kind that looked as though it hadn't been touched in years. I opened it cautiously, revealing a collection of letters and trinkets, memories frozen in time. As I sifted through them, I found a letter addressed to Margaret, filled with promises of love and dreams for the future. Each word dripped with emotion, pulling me deeper into the past. The figure stood behind me, watching intently. Read it, it urged, voice barely above a whisper. I began to read, the words wrapping around me like a warm embrace. But as I reached the end, the air grew heavy again, and the whispers escalated into a frantic cacophony. Margaret, the figure cried, its form flickering with intensity. Help me. I felt a jolt of energy course through me, and I read the final lines aloud. I will always find you, no matter the distance or the darkness. Our love will conquer all. In that moment, the room exploded with light, and the whispers converged into a single voice. Remember us. Suddenly, everything went dark. I felt weightless, as if I were suspended between two worlds. Then, the darkness began to pull away, revealing a bright, swirling light that enveloped me. I saw flashes of moments, laughter, joy, the warmth of connection, and felt the weight of loss and longing intertwined. It was overwhelming, and I gasped for breath as the memories crashed over me. Then, in an instant, it was gone. I found myself back in the room, gasping for air, heart racing. The figure stood before me, now more defined, eyes shimmering with gratitude. You did it, it said softly, a smile breaking through the sorrow. You remembered. But as the relief washed over me, I realized something was amiss. The shadows had begun to gather again, creeping closer, hungry for the light we had ignited. They're coming back, I exclaimed, panic rising in my chest. No, the figure said, stepping forward. This time, I won't let them take me. We will fight together. The air crackled with energy as we stood united, facing the encroaching darkness. I felt the weight of its pain, its memories now intertwined with my own. Together, we would confront the shadows that had haunted us both. Are you ready? It asked, determination glinting in its eyes. Yes, I replied, fear transforming into resolve. Let's end this. As the darkness swirled around us, I felt a surge of power, a connection that transcended the physical. I raised the letters high, their words glowing like embers in the night. Your love will conquer all. I shouted, and the light burst forth, illuminating the room and driving back the shadows. Together, we faced the encroaching darkness, ready to reclaim the love that had been lost, to confront the fears that had held us captive for far too long. And in that moment, I knew our stories would intertwine forever. Have you ever felt the weight of a secret, only to find it was a key? The battle raged on, the shadows swirling around us like a tempest. But we stood firm, the light from the letters illuminating our path. As I focused on the words, I felt the memories surge, resonating within me. Remember us, the whispers urged, a chorus of lost voices echoing through the darkness. With each heartbeat, the shadows recoiled, as if the light was a weapon they could not withstand. The figure beside me grew stronger, its form solidifying as it absorbed the light, merging our energies. Together, we can break the curse, it shouted, determination filling the space between us. I closed my eyes, focusing on the love and connection that had blossomed between us. We will remember, I proclaimed, and the letters began to glow brighter, bathing the room in warmth. The darkness writhed, hissing in protest, but we pushed forward, the memories fueling our strength. I could see glimpses of the past, laughter shared, dreams built, and a love that had endured against all odds. Then, I felt it, a flicker of doubt. What if it's not enough? I thought, fear creeping in again. Believe, the figure urged, its voice a steady anchor amidst the chaos. Our love is powerful. It can break through anything. With renewed resolve, I reached deep within myself, drawing on the strength of every memory, every moment that had shaped our bond. We are not alone. I shouted, and the light exploded outward, engulfing the shadows. As the darkness began to dissolve, I caught a glimpse of the figure's past, a life filled with joy, companionship, and ultimately, loss. It was a reminder of what we were fighting for. Margaret, it cried, reaching into the light, and for a fleeting moment, I saw her, a silhouette of warmth and love. We will find each other. I yelled, a surge of energy coursing through me. Our love will guide us. The light intensified, consuming everything, and I felt the shadows shatter around us, dissolving into nothingness. The air crackled with energy, and the house trembled as if awakening from a long slumber. In the aftermath, silence enveloped us. The room was transformed, sunlight pouring in through the windows, illuminating the space that had once been a prison of darkness. The figure turned to me, eyes shining with gratitude. You did it. We are free. But even as relief washed over us, I felt a lingering question in my heart. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I will find my way, it replied softly, a smile breaking through the sorrow. And you will carry our story. Remember me, not as a shadow, but as a light. Tears brimmed in my eyes as I nodded, the weight of what we had accomplished settling in my chest. I will remember. With that, the figure began to dissolve into light, its form flickering like a flame caught in the wind. I felt a bittersweet pang in my heart, knowing this was goodbye, yet grateful for the connection we had forged. Thank you, I whispered, and in that moment, I felt a warmth envelop me, a final embrace that filled the space with love. As the last remnants of the figure faded away, I found myself standing alone in the now bright room, surrounded by the letters that had sparked our journey. But even as the house remained quiet, I knew our bond would never truly break. I had uncovered the truth, and in doing so, I had set us both free. As I stepped outside into the fresh air, the world felt renewed, alive with possibilities. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. I would carry the memory of the house and its secrets with me, a reminder of love that transcends the darkness. And as I walked away, I glanced back one last time, a smile spreading across my face. The house stood there, no longer a source of fear, but a testament to the power of connection and the enduring strength of love. Goodbye, my friend, I said softly, knowing that in the end, we had both emerged into the light. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie beneath the surface of a simple puddle? As I stood by my window, watching the rain fall, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was stirring in the water. Each droplet pooled in the uneven cracks of the pavement, forming small, shimmering lakes that seemed to breathe. It was a quiet evening, the kind where shadows dance playfully under the dim light of a street lamp. But tonight, there was an undercurrent of unease that tinged the air. I lived in a modest house on the edge of town, surrounded by sprawling fields and dense woods. The rain had transformed my familiar surroundings into a muted landscape where colors faded to shades of gray and the usual sounds of life seemed muffled. I had been restless lately, feeling an inexplicable tension that lurked just beyond my understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the puddles outside began to bubble. At first, it was a gentle popping sound, like air escaping from a tight space. But as I watched, the bubbles grew larger, each one pulsating with a strange rhythm, as if they were mimicking a heartbeat. I leaned closer to the window, peering out into the gathering darkness. That's when I noticed it, a shadow moving just beneath the surface of the water. It was a flicker, a suggestion of movement that sent a chill down my spine. The puddles were no longer mere collections of rainwater, they had become something else entirely. The sound changed, shifting from the soft patter of raindrops to a more deliberate shushing, as if the water itself was whispering secrets. I could feel a heaviness in the air, a weight that pressed against my chest. I turned away, heart racing. Maybe I was imagining things, I thought. After all, I had been spending too much time alone lately, and the isolation was starting to play tricks on my mind. But even as I tried to convince myself, I felt an undeniable pull to the window, an urge to look once more at the enigmatic puddles. As I approached, I noticed how the shadows had lengthened and deepened, swallowing the edges of the sidewalk. The familiar landscape was morphing into something foreign. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, yet there was no sound. The world outside had grown eerily quiet. Then I saw it again, a hand. It emerged slowly from one of the puddles, pale and thin, fingers trailing through the water like the tendrils of a dream. My breath caught in my throat. It was not a figment of my imagination. The hand was real. My heart raced as I stumbled backward, my mind racing with fear and disbelief. What could it mean? Who, or what, was reaching for me from the depths of that water? I felt a sudden urgency to escape the confines of my home, to run far away from whatever was lurking just beyond the glass. But as I stood frozen, the hand retreated, disappearing back into the depths, leaving only the soft ripple of water in its wake. I glanced back at the dimly lit room, suddenly feeling suffocated by the walls that had always felt safe. The shadows seemed to close in around me, a reminder of the isolation I had begun to feel. I was alone, and whatever had emerged from the water was now a part of my reality. The very essence of safety had shifted, and I could no longer dismiss the creeping dread that had settled in my chest. As night deepened, I could hear the rain beginning to taper off, leaving behind a quiet stillness that was anything but peaceful. I knew that I had to find a way to confront the terror that was building in the puddles outside. But I felt trapped, caught in a web of fear that tightened with each passing moment. What was this creature? What did it want? As I stood there, I could only wonder what lay ahead. The night was far from over, and the hands from the water were reaching for something beyond my understanding. As the clock ticked steadily into the night, I struggled to shake the image of that pale hand from my mind. Sleep eluded me, and the shadows danced mockingly around my room, whispering secrets that I could not decipher. I tried to distract myself with mundane tasks, folding laundry, checking my phone, but nothing seemed to chase away the gnawing anxiety that clung to me. Finally, the exhaustion of the day caught up with me, and I reluctantly crawled into bed, hoping that sleep would bring some relief. I pulled the covers tightly around me, but it did little to stave off the chill that settled deep in my bones. My eyes fluttered closed, but the world outside was still alive with the remnants of the storm. I woke suddenly, heart racing, to the sound of a soft splashing. I glanced at the clock, 2 a.m. The rain had stopped, but the darkness outside seemed thicker, almost alive. With cautious movements, I slid out of bed and crept to the window, drawn by an irresistible urge to look. What I saw made my stomach drop. The puddles had expanded, stretching across the pavement like dark mirrors reflecting the night sky. The surface shimmered, but there was something more, a palpable energy that felt almost magnetic. I squinted, trying to make sense of the scene, when suddenly the surface began to bubble once more. A voice, faint yet haunting, drifted through the open window. "Come closer," it seemed to call, sweet and coaxing. My heart raced. It was as if the water itself was beckoning me, offering something just out of reach. I shook my head, fighting against the compulsion to obey. But the allure was strong, weaving through my thoughts like a thread of silk. I stepped back, biting my lip. What if I was losing my mind? But the hand had been real, and now this voice. The combination filled me with an unsettling blend of fear and curiosity. I glanced around my darkened room, hoping to find some semblance of normalcy, but all I saw were shadows that lurked at the edges of my vision. With a deep breath, I returned to the window. The voice grew louder, more insistent. "Join me," it whispered. "The world is so much larger than you know." I felt my resolve begin to waver, the pull of the water becoming almost irresistible. What was I missing? What could lie just beyond the boundaries of my existence? Then, with a sudden rush of clarity, I remembered the stories my grandmother used to tell, tales of creatures that lived beneath the surface, waiting for the unsuspecting to wander too close. Their beauty was enchanting, but their intentions were dark. They lure people with promises, only to drag them into the depths, never to return. "No!" I gasped, shaking my head fiercely as if I could physically repel the thought. But the splashing continued, and I could see the bubbles forming again, as if in response to my panic. I had to get away from the window, away from the seductive whispers that threatened to pull me into their depths. But before I could turn away, I caught a glimpse of movement. A second hand emerged, this one claw-like and twisted, reaching toward me with a desperate urgency. The sight sent a jolt of fear through me, and I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet. I ran to the other side of the room, heart pounding wildly. My mind raced, searching for a way to break the spell. I needed to find a light, to banish the shadows that seemed to close in on me. I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand, flicking it on with trembling fingers. The bright light flooded the room, chasing away the darkness. I dared to glance back out the window, and to my relief, the hand was gone. The puddles were still, their surface now reflecting the stark light of my lamp like a glassy sheet of ice. Yet, even as I breathed a sigh of relief, I knew that whatever was lurking in those depths hadn't vanished. It was still out there, waiting. I could feel it in the air, a thick tension that hovered, promising that this was far from over. The night stretched on, filled with the haunting silence of the aftermath. I tried to convince myself that I was safe, that the danger had receded, but the truth gnawed at me. The creature in the water wanted something, and I was no longer just an observer. I was part of its story now, and the pages were still being written. The morning light filtered through my curtains, but the warmth of the sun did little to chase away the chill that had settled in my bones. I had barely slept, tossing and turning, haunted by the images of that night. The memory of the hands, the whispers, it was all too vivid, too close. I forced myself out of bed, determined to reclaim my day, but the unease clung to me like a second skin. As I moved through my morning routine, I tried to focus on the mundane tasks of life, brewing coffee, making breakfast, but my mind kept drifting back to the puddles. I found myself glancing out the window, half expecting to see those pale fingers beckoning me once more. Instead, the world outside was quiet, the remnants of the rain reduced to glistening patches on the ground. But even in their stillness, the puddles felt different, as if they held a deeper, darker secret. I shook my head, willing myself to stop thinking about it. I needed to get out, to clear my mind. Maybe a walk would help. I laced up my shoes and stepped outside, the crisp air wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. As I walked down the familiar path, I forced myself to pay attention to the surroundings, the chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves. It was all too peaceful, too ordinary. I should have felt safe, but the feeling of being watched crept back in, heavy and oppressive. I picked up my pace, hoping to outrun the sensation. But as I approached the small park near my home, the air shifted. The playful sounds of nature began to fade, replaced by a low, unsettling hum that seemed to emanate from the ground. I hesitated, glancing around, but the park was empty, its usual charm lost beneath a veil of unease. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but something urged me to stay. The puddles in the park caught my attention. They had multiplied, creeping along the pathways, their surfaces reflecting the sky like dark mirrors. I felt drawn to them, despite the fear that gripped my heart. I took a step closer, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence. That's when I saw it again, the outline of a hand beneath the surface, fingers curling as if testing the air. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't look away. It was both mesmerizing and horrifying, the contrast pulling me in. The water rippled, and I could almost hear the voice again, clearer now, sweet and inviting. "Join us, come closer." I stumbled back, my heart racing. This was wrong. I had to leave. I turned on my heel, intent on fleeing, but the ground seemed to tremble beneath me, a subtle vibration that made me stop. My breath quickened as I sensed movement in the corners of my vision, shadows darting just beyond the trees. "Don't run," the voice crooned, now a low whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "You can't escape." I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead as I looked back. The shadows were forming into shapes, dark, elongated figures that danced at the edges of my sight. I blinked, hoping to dispel the illusion, but they were still there, closing in. The feeling of isolation that had been my constant companion now morphed into something more sinister, more threatening. I took off down the path, the sound of my footsteps thudding against the earth. Panic pushed me forward, but the shadows followed, their whispers echoing in my mind. "You belong with us. You can't fight it." I burst out of the park and into the street, but the sense of dread clung to me. I turned back, heart pounding, but the park was just a patch of stillness now, as if nothing had happened. The figures were gone, but I could still feel their presence lurking just beyond my perception. I rushed home, locking the door behind me and leaning against it, gasping for breath. The normalcy of my surroundings felt like a thin veneer over something much darker. I could no longer pretend that it was all in my head. Whatever had reached for me from the water was not done yet. It was just waiting for the right moment to strike. As night fell once more, I knew I couldn't stay in the house. I had to confront the source of my terror. The puddles were calling, and this time I needed to face whatever was hidden beneath their surface. I gathered my courage, knowing that the only way to free myself from this nightmare was to step into the darkness and uncover the truth of what lurked beneath the water. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the quiet streets as I made my way back to the park. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears, but I was resolute. I had to confront this terror before it consumed me. The darkness around me felt alive, wrapping around my senses, but I pressed on, fueled by a mix of fear and determination. As I approached the park entrance, the familiar path seemed to morph, shadows stretching and twisting in ways that were almost mocking. I hesitated for a moment, heart pounding. The last time I had been here, I was a frantic soul fleeing from unseen dangers. Now, I was returning to face them. I stepped into the park, the soft earth beneath my feet giving way to a world transformed by the night. The puddles glimmered like dark gemstones, each one pulsating gently, as if breathing. I could feel the pull, the seduction of the water. It called to me, whispering promises that curled around my mind like smoke. With each step, the air thickened, charged with an energy that sent shivers down my spine. I felt as if I were wading through a dream where reality blurred with something much more sinister. The shadows danced in my peripheral vision, teasing me with their elusive forms. I stopped at the largest puddle, its surface still and mirror-like. The moonlight reflected in it, creating a surreal portal to another world. "What do you want from me?" I whispered into the night, my voice trembling. The surface of the water began to ripple, the tranquility shattered by the emergence of that familiar hand. This time, it was joined by another, both reaching toward me, fingers twisting like vines. I stepped back, but the allure was undeniable. The voice echoed again, richer now, like a song woven into the fabric of the night. "Come, see what lies beneath. You will find what you seek." I hesitated, fear gnawing at my resolve. What did I seek? Clarity? Answers? Or was it simply an end to this nightmare? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to look closer. The water swirled, and I could see shapes forming, images flashing through the depths. Faces I didn't recognize, yet they felt familiar. Lost souls, perhaps? A rush of memories flooded my mind, friends I had lost touch with, moments I wished to reclaim. The creature beneath the surface seemed to know my thoughts, echoing them back to me in a distorted way. You yearn for connection, for understanding. We can help you find it. You don't have to be alone. I shook my head, battling against the lure of the water. No, you're not real. I shouted, but the sound felt hollow against the oppressive silence. The hands continued to emerge, grasping, pleading. I felt my heart race as they pulled at my very essence, trying to draw me into their world. The shadows around me thickened, swirling like a tempest, and I could feel the ground trembling beneath my feet. "Join us," they chorused, voices intertwining into a cacophony that resonated within me. I stumbled back, overwhelmed, but something within me flickered, a spark of defiance igniting against the darkness. "No!" I cried, shaking my head vehemently. "I won't let you take me." With a sudden burst of energy, I turned and sprinted away from the puddles, the shadows clawing at my back, their whispers now furious and despairing. I ran through the park, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The night felt alive, thrumming with a malevolent energy that chased me down the path. I could hear the splashes behind me, the laughter of the water, as if it were mocking my escape. But I had to keep going. I had to break free from the grip of whatever was trying to pull me under. I burst through the entrance of the park and onto the street, the moonlight guiding my way, illuminating the familiar path home. As I reached my door, I fumbled with the key, hands shaking. I forced it into the lock and turned, flinging myself inside just as a cold rush of air slammed against my back. I slammed the door shut and leaned against it, gasping for breath. The darkness was still there, but I felt a flicker of strength within me. I had faced the depths of my fear and survived, but the battle was far from over. The creature in the water was not just a monster, it was a reflection of my own isolation, my longing for connection, twisted into something dark and sinister. I would have to confront it again, but this time I would be ready. I would not let it pull me into its depths without a fight. I needed to uncover the truth behind the shadows and find a way to break their hold on me. The water might be a trap, but I had the will to survive, and I would not let fear define me any longer. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and tension. I tried to return to my routine, but the weight of my encounter lingered like a shadow, always close at hand. The puddles in the park had become a dark obsession. I found myself drawn to them, unable to shake the feeling that I was not finished with what lay beneath their surface. I began to research, desperate for answers. Late nights were spent poring over books and online forums, searching for tales of similar encounters, seeking any understanding of what I was facing. What I found only deepened my unease, stories of those who had been taken, who had vanished without a trace, their stories swallowed by the water. Yet, I couldn't help but feel that there was more to it than mere horror. There was a connection to be uncovered, something that could reveal why this creature was haunting me specifically. The shadows seemed to be waiting for me, whispering in the corners of my mind. One evening, I stood at my window, the moon casting silvery light over the streets, illuminating the path to the park. It called to me, a siren song I could no longer ignore. I knew I had to confront the water again, to unearth the truth of its allure. As I stepped outside, the air felt electric, charged with anticipation. I made my way to the park, the ground crunching beneath my feet as if the earth itself was alive. I could feel the weight of the shadows following, pressing on me as I approached the now familiar puddles. They glimmered under the moonlight, dark and inviting. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I walked toward the largest one. The water lay still, almost deceptively calm, and I could see my reflection staring back, wide-eyed and fearful. "Show me," I whispered, half to myself and half to the depths. "Show me what you want." The water began to swirl, and I felt the energy shift, the air around me thickening. Slowly, the surface bubbled, and that pale hand emerged once more, followed by the second, claw-like and twisted. This time, however, I was not afraid. I felt a strange sense of determination rise within me, fueled by the knowledge I had gathered. "Why me?" I demanded, my voice steady. "What do you want from me?" The hands froze mid-motion, hovering above the surface, and for a moment there was silence. Then, the water rippled, and the voice spoke, more powerful than before. "You are lost. We are all lost. But you can find your way." Images flashed before me in the depths, moments of loneliness, of yearning for connection, faces of those I had let slip away. The shadows echoed my past, twisting it into a tapestry of despair. I felt the pull again, the lure of joining them, of becoming part of something larger, yet darker. "No!" I shouted, shaking my head fiercely. "I won't let you take me. I refuse to be another lost soul." The hands plunged back into the water, swirling in a violent tempest as if my defiance had enraged whatever lurked beneath. The shadows twisted and morphed, becoming dark figures that loomed around me, their whispers rising to a cacophony. "You can't fight us," they howled, their voices a blend of sorrow and rage. "You belong with us. You are one of us." I felt the weight of their words pressing down, the seductive promise of belonging threatening to pull me under. But in that moment, I realized that my true power lay not in surrendering to the darkness, but in embracing my own light. "I choose to live," I shouted, the conviction in my voice ringing out like a beacon in the night. "I choose connection in the world of the living." With a sudden burst of energy, I took a step back and plunged my hands into the water. The cold enveloped me, shocking my senses, but I focused on the warmth within me, the light that fought against the encroaching shadows. I envisioned the connections I had forged, the love and laughter I had experienced, and I poured that energy into the water. The hands began to dissolve, the swirling shadows recoiling as if my light burned them. "No!" they shrieked, the cacophony rising to a fever pitch. "You cannot escape." But I held my ground, heart pounding, as the water surged around me. The shadows shrank back, their forms dissipating like mist. I felt the coldness of the water give way to a warmth, a clarity that swept through me, washing away the darkness. With one final shout, I pulled my hands from the water, and the surface exploded in a brilliant cascade of light. The echoes of the whispers faded, the oppressive energy lifting, replaced by a profound sense of peace. I stumbled back, breathless, heart racing. The puddles were just puddles again, innocuous and harmless, reflecting the moonlight without malice. I stood there, trembling, as the realization washed over me. I had faced the darkness, confronted my fears, and emerged victorious. As I turned to leave the park, I felt lighter, free from the weight of isolation that had threatened to consume me. I knew the shadows might linger, but they no longer had power over me. I was no longer just an observer in this world. I was part of it, connected to the lives around me. In that moment, I understood the water had been a mirror, reflecting my deepest fears, but also my greatest strength. And as I walked home beneath the watchful gaze of the moon, I felt a sense of belonging that I had long thought lost. I was alive, and I would never let the darkness take that from me again. Have you ever felt the weight of silence so thick that it presses against your ears? That's how it began for me, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the sun rising slowly over the horizon, casting soft light through my kitchen window. I was sipping my coffee, enjoying the tranquility of a new day, when I heard it, a faint whisper, barely discernible, that seemed to come from outside. I brushed it off, attributing it to my overactive imagination. But as I walked to the front door, a shiver ran down my spine. The sound was still there, a gentle murmur that beckoned me. I stepped outside, the cool air wrapping around me, and made my way to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. When I opened the mailbox, I was greeted by the same emptiness I had seen for days, just a lonely, worn-out space that echoed my expectations. Yet there it was, lying at the bottom, a plain white envelope, unmarked and devoid of any return address. My heart raced as I pulled it out. I glanced around, half expecting someone to be watching me, but the street was empty, save for the whisper of the wind through the trees. I tore open the envelope, hoping for some long-awaited letter, but it was empty, just a void of paper that felt somehow heavy in my hands. Confused, I tossed it aside and headed back inside, dismissing the strange feeling that tugged at the back of my mind. But as I closed the door, I heard it again, the whisper, softer now, yet more insistent. "Look inside." The words chilled me, reverberating in my ears. I shook my head, trying to dispel the unease that was creeping into my thoughts. What was happening? Why was I hearing this? I turned away from the door and tried to shake off the feeling. Over the next few days, I found myself drawn back to the mailbox. Every time I opened it, there were only those empty envelopes, but the whisper grew louder, more compelling. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it felt like a presence, a weight that settled over me, urging me to listen, to look deeper. The routine became unsettling. I would check the mailbox each day, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread. Each empty envelope felt like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. The whisper transformed from an eerie suggestion to a haunting command, wrapping around my thoughts. You must look inside. It wasn't long before I began to dread the mailbox. The anticipation gnawed at me, and I could feel the walls closing in. The world outside faded into a blur of color as I became more isolated, caught in this strange cycle. Friends called, inviting me out, but I declined, unable to break free from the pull of the whispers. I started to question my sanity. Was I really hearing voices, or was it all in my head? One evening, as dusk fell, I stood at the window, staring at the mailbox in the fading light. The whispers were now a cacophony in my mind, rising and falling like a tide. My heart raced, and my hands trembled. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to face whatever this was. With a deep breath, I stepped outside again, the chill of the evening air biting at my skin. As I approached the mailbox, the whisper intensified, swirling around me, wrapping me in its invisible embrace. I reached for the door, my heart pounding wildly, and pulled it open. This time, I was met with something different. The usual emptiness was replaced by a single, crumpled envelope, its edges worn and fragile. My breath caught in my throat as I held it in my hands. This one felt different, heavier, almost alive. I glanced around, the whisper now urgent, insistent. Open it. I hesitated, fear prickling at my skin. What if this was a mistake? But I had come this far, hadn't I? I tore the envelope open, my pulse racing. Inside, there was a note, hastily scrawled in a shaky hand. They are waiting for you. I stumbled back, the words echoing in my mind, and for a brief moment, I felt as if the very air around me shifted. The darkness settled in, and I realized I was no longer alone. The weight of the whisper, the enveloping shadows, it was all becoming too real. I had opened a door I couldn't close, and whatever lay on the other side was waiting to be revealed. The note trembled in my hands, the words "they are waiting for you" swirling in my mind like a storm. I backed away from the mailbox, heart racing. Who were they? What did it mean? The whispers swelled around me, now a chorus of voices, each more insistent than the last, filling my ears with dread. I turned and rushed back inside, slamming the door behind me. My heart thudded against my ribs as I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. The world outside felt different now, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted. I had crossed an invisible threshold, and I was terrified of what lay on the other side. The air inside the house felt thick with tension. I tossed the note on the kitchen table and paced back and forth, trying to make sense of what was happening. The whispering persisted, a relentless echo that seeped into my thoughts, taunting me. You can't ignore it. You must understand. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house settling around me. The silence felt oppressive, punctuated only by the distant rustle of leaves outside. I could have sworn I heard faint whispers again, this time coming from the direction of the mailbox. I buried my head under the covers, willing myself to drift into unconsciousness, but it was no use. The next day, I awoke with a sense of determination. I couldn't let fear control me any longer. I had to uncover the truth behind the whispers in the note. The idea of confronting whatever lay in that mailbox became my singular focus. As I stepped outside, the morning sun bathed the world in warmth, but it felt strangely hollow. I approached the mailbox slowly, the whispers swirling in anticipation. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened the door and found it empty again, the stillness almost mocking me. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Days turned into a blur as I continued to check the mailbox, each visit filled with hope and dread. I returned each evening, desperate for answers, only to be met with more silence. The whispers transformed into a constant hum in my mind, an ever-present reminder of what I had uncovered. It was as if the mailbox had become a portal, an entryway into something I couldn't quite grasp. Then, one fateful evening, I stood at my window, watching the shadows grow longer as the sun dipped below the horizon. I sensed something was different. The air felt charged with anticipation. Compelled by inexplicable force, I stepped outside and approached the mailbox. To my shock, another envelope lay inside, even more worn and crumpled than the last. My heart raced as I pulled it out, the whispers crescendoing around me. I could feel the energy pulsing from the envelope, almost as if it were alive. This time, my hands shook with a mix of fear and excitement as I tore it open. The note inside was simple but chilling. "Join us tonight." I staggered back, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. The urgency of the words sank deep into my bones. Who were they? What awaited me? The world around me felt surreal, the familiar now alien. I glanced up at the darkening sky, and for a moment, I thought I saw shadows flit past the trees, just beyond the edge of my vision. The whispering grew louder, enveloping me in its eerie embrace. It was no longer just a sound, it felt like a call to arms, a beckoning from beyond. I knew that I was being drawn into something beyond my understanding, and deep down, a part of me was both terrified and intrigued. That night, I found myself standing at the edge of my driveway, staring at the mailbox under the glow of a streetlight. I felt the weight of the decision pressing on my chest. I could turn back, retreat into the safety of my home, or I could answer the call that resonated within me. With a deep breath, I took a step forward, the whispers rising to a fever pitch in my mind. I reached for the mailbox, and as my fingers brushed against its surface, a wave of cold washed over me. I could feel the pulse of something beyond, an invitation to a world that existed just out of reach. In that moment, I understood that whatever waited for me in the shadows would not simply reveal itself. I would have to confront it, face the unknown head-on. I had already crossed the threshold. Now it was time to find out what lay on the other side of the whispers. As I prepared to turn back toward the house, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a shadow darting between the trees. My heart raced as the whispers intensified, merging into a single, unified voice that called to me, urging me to join them. With a mix of fear and determination, I took a deep breath and prepared to follow the sound into the unknown. The shadows seemed to beckon me, their forms shifting like smoke under the dim streetlight. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a hesitant step toward the trees, the whispering growing louder, wrapping around me like a shroud. "Join us," they called, their voices merging into a haunting melody that danced on the edges of my sanity. I knew I was crossing a line, venturing into a realm I couldn't fully comprehend, but curiosity pulled me forward, urging me to uncover the truth behind the whispers. As I stepped into the darkness, the world around me transformed. The familiar shapes of my neighborhood faded, replaced by an eerie stillness that hung heavy in the air. The deeper I walked into the shadows, the more the whispers transformed. They morphed from beckoning calls to something more sinister, laced with an undercurrent of desperation. "You belong here," they seemed to chant, echoing off the trees that towered above me. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet shifted, and I stumbled into a small clearing. A circle of dim light illuminated the center, revealing a gathering of figures cloaked in darkness. They stood in silence, their faces obscured, but I could feel their eyes on me, watching, waiting. The air buzzed with an electric tension that set my nerves on edge. "What do you want from me?" I called out, my voice breaking the heavy silence. The whispers quieted, replaced by a single voice that rose from the center of the gathering. It was soft yet commanding, a sound that resonated deep within my bones. "Welcome," it said. "We have been waiting for you." I felt a chill run down my spine as the figures began to shift, moving closer. I searched their faces for recognition but found nothing but shadow. "Who are you?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. "We are the forgotten," the voice replied. "Those who have been cast aside, silenced by the living. But you are different. You hear our whispers." Confusion and fear mingled within me. "I don't understand," I stammered, stepping back. "I'm not like you. I'm not forgotten." A figure stepped forward, its outline sharpening in the dim light. "But you are. You feel the isolation, the weight of the world pressing down. We are here to offer you a choice. Join us, become one with the shadows, or remain trapped in the silence of your existence." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of despair. I glanced back toward the path I had come from, my mind racing. I had been so drawn to the whispers, so desperate to understand their meaning, but now I was faced with a choice that felt insurmountable. As the figures closed in, their voices rose again, a cacophony of echoes that filled the clearing. "You can escape your loneliness. You can belong. Join us." The whispers clawed at my mind, tempting me with promises of connection and understanding. I felt the weight of their sorrow, their longing. My heart ached with a deep-rooted loneliness that resonated with their plight. Yet, a flicker of resistance ignited within me. I didn't want to surrender my identity, my life. "No!" I shouted, my voice ringing out defiantly. I refused to let go of who I am. The gathering fell silent, the figures freezing in their tracks as my words pierced through the haze of shadows. For a moment, I felt a ripple of confusion spread among them, and I seized the opportunity to turn and run. I sprinted through the trees, branches scraping against my skin as the whispers transformed into howls, echoing behind me. "You cannot escape. You are one of us." Panic surged through me as I navigated the darkness, the path blurring into a maze of shadows. I could feel the energy shifting around me, as if the very air was alive with their anger. The more I ran, the more the whispers grew louder, a haunting reminder of what I had almost become. Just as I thought I could break free, I stumbled and fell to the ground, pain shooting through my knee. I looked back, and for a split second, I saw them, a mass of shadows, undulating and swirling, reaching out toward me. Their voices were a symphony of despair and rage, echoing in my ears as they drew closer. With a surge of adrenaline, I pushed myself up and continued to run, desperation fueling my every movement. I could feel the darkness closing in, a relentless tide that threatened to pull me under. But I wouldn't let it. I couldn't. I was determined to return to the light, to reclaim my life. Finally, I burst through the trees and back into my driveway, breathless and shaking. I slammed the front door behind me, locking it with trembling hands. The whispers faded into the night, but their echoes remained, a haunting reminder of what I had faced. As I sank to the floor, my heart racing, I understood the depth of the choice I had made. I had rejected the darkness, but the price was steep. The shadows had tasted my fear, and I knew they would not easily forget. They were still out there, waiting, whispering, and I could feel their presence lingering just beyond the walls of my home. The feeling of isolation wrapped around me once more, but this time it was different. I had confronted my fears and emerged, but at what cost? The connection I had yearned for now felt more distant than ever, and the whispers, though silenced, would haunt me. I knew they would return, and next time, I might not be so strong. The days that followed felt like an endless loop of dread. I avoided the mailbox, my heart racing every time I stepped outside. I could still feel the lingering weight of the shadows, their whispers etched into my mind like a brand. Each time I glanced at the mailbox, I felt a mix of fear and a haunting curiosity. Would they return? What would they want from me next? I tried to distract myself with mundane tasks, cleaning the house, watching television, and cooking meals. But the silence of my home felt heavy, as if it were pressing down on me. Friends reached out, but I deflected their invitations, choosing solitude over the company of the living. I was afraid they would see the change in me, the lingering darkness that I couldn't shake. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself drawn to the window. A strange feeling of inevitability washed over me. The shadows stretched across the lawn, and for the first time in days, I felt an undeniable urge to confront the darkness once more. With a deep breath, I stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky painted with hues of orange and purple. I approached the mailbox, my heart pounding with each step. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, like static before a storm. When I reached it, I opened the door, and my breath caught in my throat. Inside lay another envelope, darker than before, as if it had absorbed the very essence of the night. The whispering started again, a soft murmur that wrapped around me like a vine. You have returned. I pulled the envelope out, the paper rough against my fingers. As I opened it, a gust of wind swept through the yard, carrying the whispers with it. Inside was another note, this one written in a spidery hand. You cannot deny who you are. You must face your truth. The words sank deep into my gut, stirring a mix of fear and anger. Face my truth? I shouted into the darkness. What truth? I'm not one of you. The shadows around me shifted, and I felt a chill run through the air. You were chosen, and the choice is not yours alone. You cannot escape your nature, the voice echoed, its tone shifting from pleading to commanding. Panic surged within me. I knew I had to confront whatever this was. I had denied my connection to the whispers, but the truth was that they had awakened something in me, a part one had kept buried under layers of fear and isolation. I had always felt different, disconnected from the world around me, and now I was being offered a glimpse into something I didn't fully understand. I won't give in. I shouted defiantly, though a part of me trembled with uncertainty. Then prepare for the reckoning, the voice whispered, cold and unyielding. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a figure, dark and indistinct, hovering just beyond the edge of the light. I stepped back, my heart racing as I felt the weight of its presence pressing down on me. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure shifted, its form becoming clearer. I could make out a face, familiar yet distorted, a reflection of all the fears I had tried to escape. We seek to awaken what lies within you, to help you embrace your true self. You have felt the call, you know it. The whispers are only the beginning. The truth of those words struck me like a blow. Deep down, I had been waiting for something to pull me from my isolation. The shadows promised connection, understanding, a chance to be seen in a way I had never experienced. Yet, the thought of losing myself to them was terrifying. "Join us," the figure said, its voice smooth yet unsettling. "You can no longer deny the truth. We are your kin, your family. Together, we can break the chains of solitude." A surge of anger ignited within me. "You think I want to be like you? I want to be free, to live my life." "Freedom is an illusion," the figure replied, its voice deepening, the shadows swirling around it. "You are already bound by your fears. We offer a way to embrace your true nature." In that moment, I realized that this was not just a battle for my soul, it was a confrontation with my deepest fears and desires. The shadows represented everything I had tried to suppress, the darkness I had avoided for so long. I could either embrace it or let it consume me. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of strength within me. "I am not afraid of who I am," I declared, my voice steady. "I won't be a part of your shadows." The figure recoiled, the whispers rising in a furious crescendo. "You cannot reject us. We are within you." The shadows surged forward, swirling around me, but I stood my ground. "No! You don't own me!" I shouted, forcing the words out with every fiber of my being. With a surge of will, I envisioned the light surrounding me, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. "I choose to live. I choose to fight." The shadows recoiled, hissing and swirling, their voices rising in panic. "You cannot escape. We will find you." As the darkness retreated, I stumbled backward, breathless. The figure dissolved into the night, and the whispers faded, leaving me standing alone under the stars. My heart raced as I realized what I had done. I had faced the shadows and emerged, at least for now. But even as I stood there, victorious, I knew the battle was far from over. The whispers would return, and I could feel their presence lingering, waiting for my resolve to wane. I had chosen the light, but the shadows were persistent, and their pull would be hard to resist. As I turned back toward my house, the weight of solitude settled over me once more. I had faced the darkness, but the isolation remained. What had I truly gained? The choice I had made was clear, but the path ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty. And as I closed the door behind me, I understood that the whispers would always be a part of me, an echo of what I had fought against, a reminder of the shadows that lingered just out of sight. The reckoning had only just begun. Days passed, each blending into the next, but the shadows never left my mind. They lingered like a distant storm cloud, always on the horizon, threatening to break open at any moment. I tried to resume my life, to find comfort in routine, but the whispers had altered something deep within me. Every time I passed the mailbox, a sense of dread washed over me. I could feel their pull, the urge to check for new messages. The call of the unknown was relentless, but I resisted. I had faced them once. I didn't want to invite that darkness back into my life. But one evening, while cleaning up after dinner, the urge became unbearable. I felt drawn to the front door, my heart racing as I stepped outside. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silvery shadows across the ground. It was quiet, too quiet, and the silence felt suffocating. As I approached the mailbox, I fought against the sense of inevitability that washed over me. When I opened the door, my breath caught. There it was, a new envelope, even darker than the last, its presence an undeniable signal that they were still watching, still waiting. With trembling hands, I pulled it out. The whispers echoed in my mind, rising like a tide, urging me to open it. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding, but curiosity won over fear. I tore it open, and as I read the note, a chill ran down my spine. Time is running out. The choice must be made. Come to the clearing tonight. Panic surged within me. They were summoning me back, compelling me to confront the shadows once more. I glanced toward the woods, where darkness loomed, waiting to swallow me whole. Yet, there was something in the note, an urgency that hinted at an impending consequence. I didn't want to go, but the thought of ignoring their call felt even more terrifying. What would happen if I refused? I could almost hear the whispers intensifying, their insistent chorus growing louder with each heartbeat. You can't escape. You belong with us. The decision weighed heavily on my chest. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I had faced them once. I could do it again. Maybe this time I could find a way to put an end to it. That night, I stepped into the clearing, my heart pounding in anticipation. The moonlight spilled into the space, illuminating the dark figures that awaited me. They stood in a circle, their forms shifting like shadows caught in a breeze. The air was thick with tension as I approached, and I could feel their eyes on me, piercing through the darkness. Welcome back, the familiar voice intoned, smooth and inviting. You have returned to make your choice. What choice? I shot back, my voice shaky but defiant. I'm not here to join you. The figures shifted closer, and the whispers rose again, wrapping around me like a cocoon. You misunderstand. This isn't about joining. It's about understanding who you are and what you are capable of. I squared my shoulders, trying to hold my ground. I won't give in to fear. I'm not afraid of the darkness. Ah, but you are afraid of isolation, the voice replied, resonating in the night air. You've felt it your entire life. We can offer you connection, belonging, and the power to embrace your true self. The shadows swirled, forming shapes that danced at the edges of my vision, tantalizing and alluring. I felt the pull of their promise, the temptation to join them in their shadowy existence. But then I remembered the loneliness that had plagued me, the void that had driven me to seek them out in the first place. I won't be defined by my fears. I shouted, my voice echoing through the clearing. I choose to face my loneliness, not to surrender to it. The figures recoiled, their forms flickering like candle flames in a breeze. You cannot fight what is within you. The darkness is part of you. It is woven into your very being. I could feel the weight of their words pressing down on me. Doubt not in my resolve. Had I truly escaped their grasp? Or was this just the beginning of a deeper battle? Enough! I screamed, feeling the surge of anger rise within me. I refuse to be a pawn in your game. I will find my own way. As my words echoed in the clearing, a powerful wind swept through, scattering the shadows. For a brief moment, I felt a surge of clarity, a realization that I was not alone in my struggle. My choice was not about rejecting the darkness, but about embracing my own light. Suddenly, the whispers turned into anguished howls, the figures twisting in frustration. You will regret this. The shadows will always find you. With that, I turned and ran, the darkness swirling behind me like a tempest. I didn't look back as I sprinted through the trees, branches scraping against my skin, the night air heavy with the remnants of their fury. As I broke free from the forest and reached my home, I slammed the door shut and locked it tight. My heart raced as I leaned against the door, breathless and shaken. I had faced them, and though I had escaped, I knew that the battle was far from over. But as I stood there, a flicker of hope ignited within me. I had chosen to fight for my light, to embrace the parts of myself I had long hidden away. The whispers might return, but now I was prepared. I wouldn't let fear define me. I would confront it head on. The night was quiet, but I could still feel their presence lingering just beyond the walls of my home. I had taken a stand, and though the darkness was persistent, I was determined to hold on to the light. As I settled into bed, exhaustion washed over me, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. I had faced the shadows and emerged, but I knew the fight was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but I was ready to meet them, no matter what the whispers had in store. Have you ever watched your shadow move and wondered if it had a life of its own? This thought struck me as I stood in front of the mirror that morning, getting ready for another mundane day at work. The soft morning light spilled into my bedroom, casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the chill creeping up my spine. As I adjusted my tie, I glanced at my reflection. My shadow was there, of course, but something felt off. It was as if it didn't quite match my movements. I raised my hand to smooth down my collar, and the shadow hesitated, lingering a moment longer before mimicking me. A trick of the light, I told myself. Just a weird angle. Shaking off the discomfort, I finished getting dressed and stepped into the kitchen. The house was silent, save for the sound of the clock ticking in the hallway. I poured a cup of coffee, taking a moment to breathe in the rich aroma. My eyes drifted to the window, where the sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the floor. But even as I sipped my coffee, the unease lingered. I glanced down at my shadow, which seemed to flicker, shifting shapes almost imperceptibly. I tried to brush it off, but there was an unsettling sensation deep in my gut. It was as if my shadow was watching me, waiting for something. I finished my coffee and grabbed my bag, heading out the door. The cool morning air hit me, and I took a moment to breathe it in. But as I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that my shadow was following me too closely, almost as if it were tethered to me by a thread that was slowly tightening. The drive to work was uneventful, but my mind kept drifting back to that moment in the mirror. I parked and stepped out, glancing around the empty lot. My shadow stretched out behind me, almost eager to keep pace. The sunlight was bright, yet my heart felt heavy with an inexplicable dread. Inside the office, everything seemed normal. People were chatting, the hum of computers filled the air, and the smell of burnt coffee wafted from the break room. But as I settled into my desk, I found it harder to focus. I glanced at the clock, feeling a nagging sense of time slipping away. My shadow, cast by the overhead lights, flickered again, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was trying to tell me something. "Hey, Mark," my colleague Lisa called, pulling me from my thoughts. "You good? You seem a bit out of it today." "Yeah, just a rough morning," I replied, forcing a smile. But the truth was, I felt a growing sense of isolation. No one else seemed to notice the oddity of my shadow. It felt like my own personal burden. As the day wore on, I found myself glancing at my shadow more frequently. Each time, it seemed to lag behind or move out of sync with my actions. My heart raced as I imagined what it meant. Was it just a trick of the mind, or was there something more sinister at play? By lunchtime, I decided to take a walk outside, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. I stepped into the sunlight, but the moment I did, my shadow elongated, stretching toward the ground in a way that felt almost unnatural. I quickened my pace, trying to shake the feeling that it was no longer just a reflection of me. The vibrant sounds of the city surrounded me, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant honking of cars, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Yet, my focus remained on the ground, where my shadow twisted and turned, its movements becoming more pronounced and erratic. As I made my way back to the office, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. The closer I got to my building, the more pronounced the unease became. I stopped at the entrance, staring down at my shadow, which now seemed to pulse and quiver as if it were alive. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the rising panic. "It's just a shadow," I muttered under my breath, but deep down, I could feel something darker lurking beneath the surface. I entered the building, my heart racing, and the moment I crossed the threshold, I felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shapes across the floor. My shadow danced unnaturally, twisting into shapes that seemed to mock me. I stepped back, breathless, the walls of the corridor closing in around me. Then, in that moment of sheer panic, I realized my shadow was not just a reflection of me, it had become something else entirely. Something was shifting within me, and the darkness I had tried to ignore was beginning to surface. As I stood there, paralyzed by fear, I knew I had to confront whatever this was. The shadows were closing in, not just on the floor, but deep within my mind. And the more I tried to fight it, the more it seemed to take shape, a dark reflection of everything I had hidden away. The day was far from over, and I was already losing control. I had to find a way to break free from this unsettling presence before it consumed me whole. The thought of facing that darkness sent shivers down my spine, but I knew it was a confrontation I could no longer avoid. As the afternoon dragged on, I found it increasingly difficult to concentrate. My mind was a storm of confusion and fear, the shadows in my office flickering ominously in my peripheral vision. Each time I caught sight of my shadow on the floor, it felt like an echo of something sinister lurking just beyond my understanding. When 5 o'clock finally rolled around, I hurriedly packed my things, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the office. The moment I stepped outside, I felt a brief surge of relief, but as I turned to head to my car, my shadow seemed to hesitate, stretching unnaturally across the pavement. "Why is this happening?" I whispered to myself, clutching my bag tightly as I walked. The parking lot was empty, the quiet unsettling. My mind raced with questions, but the answers eluded me. I had always believed shadows were merely a reflection of our actions, but now they felt like something more, a dark entity, separate yet intrinsically linked to me. Once I reached home, I closed the door and leaned against it, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. The familiar surroundings felt foreign, the walls closing in like a cage. I flipped on the lights, their brightness almost blinding, and turned to look at my shadow once more. It was still there, lurking in the corner of the room, but this time it seemed to writhe and twist, as if trying to break free. I shivered and shook my head, trying to dispel the growing sense of dread. "This is all in my head," I reassured myself. "Just a trick of the light." I poured myself a glass of water and settled onto the couch, but the sense of isolation crept back in. I reached for my phone, scrolling through social media in a futile attempt to distract myself. But the shadow on the wall continued to draw my attention, growing larger with each passing moment. Then it happened. As I stared at my reflection in the darkened window, I noticed a shift. The shadow seemed to pulse, its shape distorting into something that resembled a figure, a silhouette that was not mine. My heart raced as I realized it was no longer a simple shadow. It had taken on a life of its own, moving independently of me. "Stop it!" I yelled, feeling a surge of anger mixed with fear. "You're just a shadow." But the figure only wavered, as if mocking my command. Desperate for clarity, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and pointed it at the wall, illuminating the dark space where the shadow lingered. For a brief moment, the beam of light revealed its true form, a dark, amorphous figure that seemed to pulse like a living being, its edges blurring and fading into the surrounding darkness. I stumbled back, my breath quickening as I tried to process what I was seeing. "This isn't real," I muttered, shaking my head. "It can't be real." But the figure didn't dissipate, it remained there, a sinister reflection of my fears. Suddenly, a knock echoed from the front door, startling me. I jumped up, heart racing, and hurried to open it. On the other side stood my neighbor, Tom, looking concerned. "Hey, Mark. Everything all right? You seemed a bit off this morning," he said, glancing past me into the house. "Yeah, just a rough day," I replied, forcing a smile. But even as I spoke, I could feel the shadow lurking behind me, the weight of its presence pressing down on my chest. "Want to grab a beer?" "I could use the company," Tom suggested, his friendly demeanor contrasting sharply with the chaos in my mind. "Sure, sounds good," I said, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of my home. As we walked to his place next door, I felt a momentary sense of relief. Inside Tom's apartment, the atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. But as we settled into conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that my shadow was still with me, lurking just outside my awareness. Every time I glanced toward the door, I half expected to see it waiting, watching. "Mark, you okay?" "You seem a bit distracted," Tom said, concern etched on his face. "Just a lot on my mind," I admitted, forcing myself to focus on our conversation. But no matter how hard I tried, the image of that dark figure kept creeping back into my thoughts. The night wore on, and I found myself sipping my beer, laughing at Tom's jokes, but I felt a disconnect. It was as if my mind was split, half of me present while the other was trapped in a haunting dance with that shadow. I couldn't escape it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I excused myself and returned home. The silence was deafening, and as I stepped through the door, the feeling of dread washed over me once more. The shadows in my house seemed to stretch and elongate, twisting into grotesque shapes that made my skin crawl. I flipped on all the lights, desperately trying to illuminate the darkness that felt so alive. "You're just a shadow," I whispered, but the words felt hollow, echoing back at me like a taunt. I knew I had to confront it, to understand what this darkness wanted from me. I grabbed a notebook and pen, determined to document everything I had experienced. I needed to find a way to break this connection, to reclaim my sense of self. As I wrote, the feeling of isolation deepened. Each word I scrawled felt like a thread unraveling, and with every sentence, I sensed the shadow lurking closer, watching, waiting. The air grew thick, and a chill swept through the room, making me shiver. Then, as I turned the page, I felt it, a whisper, soft and insidious, curling around my mind. "You cannot escape. I am a part of you." My heart raced, and I felt the weight of its presence pressing down on me. "No!" I shouted, slamming the notebook shut. "I won't let you take me." But as I stood there, facing the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I realized that the battle was only just beginning. The shadow was not merely a reflection, it was a manifestation of my deepest fears, a reminder of the parts of myself I had long tried to ignore. If I was to confront it, I would need to delve into the darkness, to face what I had hidden away. But with each passing moment, I felt the distance between me and the light growing wider. I had to find a way to reclaim my shadow, to transform it from a symbol of fear into a part of my story that I could own. As I turned off the lights and prepared for bed, I felt a chill in the air, a whisper of the shadow wrapping around me like a shroud. But deep down, I knew I had a choice. I could confront this darkness or let it consume me. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt the weight of that decision pressing heavily on my heart. I woke the next morning feeling drained, as if the night had stolen my energy. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating the room, yet the warmth did little to chase away the cold grip of fear that clung to me. I sat up slowly, taking a deep breath, and glanced at the floor. My shadow lay there, still and silent, but its stillness felt unsettling. "Today is the day," I muttered to myself, my voice barely above a whisper. I needed to confront this darkness, to understand its nature before it consumed me entirely. After a quick breakfast, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of heading to the office, I grabbed my notebook and headed to the nearby park. It was a familiar place, one that had once brought me peace, and I hoped it would help me find clarity. The park was bustling with activity, children laughing, dogs barking, and the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. Yet, despite the cheerful atmosphere, I felt a heavy weight in my chest. I settled on a bench under a large oak tree, opened my notebook, and began to write. As I jotted down my thoughts, I tried to unpack my feelings about the shadow. What did it represent? What fears had I buried deep within myself? With each word, I felt the darkness hovering just beyond the edges of my consciousness, waiting to creep back in. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it again, a flicker of movement in the grass. I turned my head, and there it was, a shadow that didn't match the sun's position. It pulsed and twisted, growing larger and darker with each passing second. My heart raced as I realized it wasn't just a trick of the light, it was alive. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, startling a nearby couple who glanced at me in confusion. The shadow flickered, responding to my voice with a shiver of darkness. "What do you want from me?" The laughter of children and the rustling leaves faded into the background as I focused solely on that shifting silhouette. It seemed to swell with my fear, feeding off my emotions. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and tried to center myself. I couldn't let it take control. "Listen to me," I said, my voice steadier now. "I won't let you control me. I want to understand you." For a moment, the shadow stilled. The park sounds returned, but now they felt muted, as if the world had receded to let this confrontation take place. I opened my eyes, and the shadow seemed to shrink slightly, as if acknowledging my words. "What are you?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Are you my fear? My regrets? What is it that you want?" As if in response, the shadow morphed, transforming into fleeting images of moments I had long buried, failures, losses, moments of weakness. Each image struck me like a punch to the gut, and I staggered back, feeling exposed. "No," I gasped, shaking my head. "I can't relive this." But the shadow pressed on, each flicker revealing more of my past, regrets I had tried to forget, dreams that had slipped through my fingers. It was a living testament to everything I had tried to suppress. "Stop!" I shouted, tears stinging my eyes. "I can't face all of this." Yet, as I spoke, a realization began to dawn on me. This shadow was not just an enemy, it was a part of me. A part one had denied for too long. If I wanted to regain control, I had to embrace it, to acknowledge that these fears and regrets were not just shadows to be cast aside, but experiences that shaped who I was. "Okay," I said slowly, wiping my tears. I see you. I understand that you represent my fears, my regrets. But I am more than these moments. I am capable of change. The shadow wavered, flickering as if considering my words. I could feel a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle easing of the weight that had pressed down on my chest. Let me reclaim you, I whispered, feeling a strange sense of empowerment. You are a part of me, but you don't have to control me. Together, we can face whatever comes next. As I spoke those words, the shadow began to dissolve, its dark edges softening. The images it had shown me faded into the background, replaced by a soft glow that filled the space around me. I felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. But just as I began to relax, a cold wind swept through the park, and the atmosphere shifted once more. The shadow reformed, more defined and ominous than before. It loomed larger, darker, and more menacing. Panic surged within me. No, this isn't what I meant, I cried, standing up from the bench. The laughter and joy around me faded into a chilling silence, leaving only the sound of my racing heartbeat. The shadow surged forward, and I felt a rush of fear as it enveloped me, plunging me into darkness. I was surrounded by a void, a place where the light could not penetrate. My breath quickened, and I fought against the sensation of being swallowed whole. In that moment of despair, I realized I had a choice. I could let the shadow consume me, or I could fight back. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I focused on the light, the warmth of the sun that had brought me here. No! I shouted into the void. I refused to be a prisoner of my past. Suddenly, a beam of light pierced through the darkness, illuminating the shadow. I felt warmth flooding back into my body, and I grasped onto that feeling, pulling it toward me. The shadow writhed, its form distorting under the brightness. As the light grew brighter, I felt the grip of fear begin to loosen. The shadow screamed, a sound that echoed in the emptiness, before finally breaking apart, dissolving into the light that enveloped me. I gasped as I was released from the darkness, stumbling back onto the park bench. The sounds of laughter and life returned, bright and vivid. I blinked against the sunlight, my heart racing as I tried to process what had just happened. The shadow was gone, but its remnants lingered within me, transformed. I could still feel the weight of my regrets, but now they felt manageable, woven into the tapestry of who I was. As I sat there catching my breath, I realized that facing the darkness hadn't destroyed me, it had liberated me. I was free to move forward, no longer shackled by the shadows of my past. And as I watched the children playing in the park, I knew I could embrace my future, shadows and all. I would carry those experiences with me, but they would no longer define me. With each step forward, I would reclaim my light. The next few days passed in a blur, the lingering warmth of that park encounter fueling my newfound resolve. I returned to my routine, but everything felt different. The shadow that had once threatened to consume me had transformed into a companion, a reminder of my past, but not a shackle that bound me. I resumed my work, diving into projects with a renewed energy. Colleagues noticed the change in me, remarking on my focus and enthusiasm. Yet, even in this clarity, I felt the shadow whispering at the edges of my consciousness, a quiet reminder that my struggle wasn't over. One evening, while working late, the office grew quiet. I was absorbed in my tasks when I glanced up to see my reflection in the glass windows. Behind me, in the dim light, I noticed a flicker, a shadow that was moving on its own, undulating like smoke. My heart sank, the familiar weight of fear creeping back. Not again, I murmured, fighting the urge to bolt. But I was no longer that person paralyzed by fear. I would confront this. I took a deep breath, facing the shadow directly. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the quiver in my gut. The shadow pulsed, a swirling mass that seemed to absorb the light around it. "You thought you could escape me?" it whispered, the sound reverberating through the empty office. "You cannot simply wish me away." "I'm not trying to escape you," I replied, stepping closer. "I understand you now. You're a part of me, my fears, my regrets. But I won't let you control my life anymore." With each word, the shadow writhed, forming shapes that reflected my past mistakes, missed opportunities, painful memories, the weight of expectations. It felt like being thrust back into those moments, raw and overwhelming. "Stop!" I yelled, pushing against the emotional tide that threatened to pull me under. "I've faced you before. You are not my master." The shadow surged, its presence looming larger. "But I am your truth," it hissed. "Without me, who are you?" In that moment, I realized what it was trying to do. It wanted me to doubt myself, to feel the old fear creep back in. I had to remember my strength, the light I had found in the darkness. "I am more than my fears," I declared, my voice gaining strength. "I am defined by how I rise above them." With every word, I felt a light building inside me, warm and radiant. The office lights flickered as if responding to my resolve. I reached deep within, pulling forth that light, letting it shine against the encroaching darkness. "Be gone!" I shouted, thrusting my hands forward as the light exploded from me, bathing the room in brilliance. The shadow screamed, a cacophony of rage and despair. It twisted and distorted, shrinking under the force of my light. I could feel its energy attempting to pull me back, to drag me into the depths of my past. But I stood firm, unwavering. "You do not define me. You cannot take my light." I pushed harder, focusing on all I had overcome, all I had achieved since that day in the park. In a final, desperate surge, the shadow collapsed in on itself, a vortex of darkness spiraling into nothingness. I gasped, feeling the weight lift from my chest, the air growing lighter. The office, once filled with the heaviness of the past, now resonated with clarity and freedom. I stood there for a moment, breathless, as the light continued to glow around me. The shadow had been vanquished, but not without a cost. I understood now that it would always be a part of me, an echo of my fears and failures, but it no longer held power over me. As I gathered my things and prepared to leave, I felt a sense of accomplishment washing over me. I was ready to embrace my future, the journey ahead filled with potential. Days turned into weeks, and the shadow faded into the background of my life. I no longer felt its oppressive presence. Instead, I carried with me the lessons it had taught me. I learned to navigate my fears, turning to them not as enemies but as guides that reminded me of my strength. One night, as I prepared for bed, I looked out the window at the moonlit sky. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, and I felt at peace. I had found balance, a way to integrate my shadow without letting it dominate my life. As I settled under the covers, I noticed my silhouette cast against the wall. It moved softly, synchronizing with my own movements, no longer an independent entity. I smiled, realizing that it had transformed into something beautiful, a reminder of my journey. "Thank you," I murmured to the shadow, my heart filled with gratitude, "for teaching me how to stand strong." In the silence of my room, I understood that I would never be completely free of the shadows of my past, but I had learned to embrace them. They were now a part of my story, woven into the fabric of who I was. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The darkness that once held me captive had become a friend, a guide. And with each passing day, I would continue to walk toward the light, ready to face whatever came next, knowing I had the strength to shine through the shadows. Time flowed like a river, carrying me through days and nights, each moment a brushstroke on the canvas of my life. The memories of my past, once vivid and oppressive, had faded into a gentle hum, a background melody to my newfound existence. I found joy in the ordinary, morning coffee, laughter with friends, the warmth of sunlight on my skin. But shadows can linger, and on particularly quiet nights, I would occasionally feel their presence creeping back, like a distant echo. It was during one of those nights that I was drawn back to the park where I had confronted my darkness. Wrapped in a light jacket, I walked the familiar path, the crunch of gravel beneath my feet grounding me. The park was serene, the moon casting a silver glow over the landscape. I found my favorite bench under the old oak tree, the very spot where I had faced the shadow of my past. As I sat there, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the cool night air to fill my lungs. The gentle rustling of leaves above me felt like a whisper, and I let my mind wander back to that day, the confrontation, the struggle, the release. In the stillness, I allowed my thoughts to flow freely. "You taught me so much," I whispered to the night. "You showed me that fear is not the enemy, but a part of my journey." Suddenly, I felt a shift in the air around me. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The shadows cast by the trees seemed to dance, swirling in the moonlight. I opened my eyes and saw it, the familiar flicker of darkness. But this time, it didn't frighten me. I remained still, heart steady. "I know you," I said softly, watching as the shadow took shape. It shimmered, reflecting the light of the moon, morphing into a figure that mirrored my own. "I have embraced you," I continued, feeling an unexpected warmth radiate from within. "You are part of my story, but you don't define me. Together, we can find balance." The shadow swayed, its edges softening, transforming from a menacing presence to something more fluid, more alive. It swirled around me, and for the first time, I felt a connection, an understanding that transcended fear. "Let's walk together," I said, rising from the bench. I began to move, and the shadow flowed alongside me, no longer just a reflection but a partner in my journey. As we walked through the park, I could feel the weight of the past lifting. Each step was a reminder of my strength, my resilience. The laughter of children echoed in the distance, and I smiled, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. We reached a clearing bathed in moonlight, and I paused, turning to face the shadow. "Thank you for everything," I said, a sense of gratitude filling my heart. "I am ready to embrace my future, with you by my side." The shadow pulsed gently, and in that moment, I realized that I had transformed not just my perception of fear, but the very nature of the shadow itself. It was no longer something to be vanquished or avoided, but a part of me that guided me toward growth. With renewed purpose, I walked back toward the path that led home. The night air felt crisp and refreshing, each breath invigorating. I knew that my journey wasn't over. There would always be challenges ahead, new shadows to face, but I felt equipped to handle whatever came my way. The moon shone brightly above me, illuminating the road ahead. I looked to my side, and there it was, the shadow, a gentle companion walking with me into the light of a new day. Together, we would face the future, knowing that the light within could always conquer the darkness, forging a path filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of tomorrow. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I first noticed it, a tattered doll sitting in the dumpster behind my apartment building. At first glance, it seemed like just another piece of discarded childhood, a remnant of someone's forgotten past. I hesitated, my curiosity pulling me closer. What kind of child would abandon such a thing? As I approached, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The doll's glassy eyes seemed to glimmer in the fading light, and its frayed hair fluttered slightly in the breeze. I could almost hear whispers carried by the wind, urging me to turn away. Yet, there was something about it that held my gaze, an inexplicable pull. I picked it up, feeling the weight of its lifeless body in my hands. The face was painted with a smile that now seemed sinister, as if it were mocking me. I decided to take it inside, thinking it could be a quirky addition to my collection of vintage items. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, unease settled in the pit of my stomach. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The streetlights outside flickered, casting eerie shadows in my room. I could hear the familiar sounds of the city, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, and the rustle of leaves. Yet, amidst those sounds, there was something else, a soft rustling, almost like footsteps, coming from the direction of the dumpster. I dismissed it, telling myself it was just my imagination. But as the hours dragged on, the noise persisted. Each creak of the floorboards above me echoed like a warning bell, urging me to stay alert. Finally, sleep claimed me, but my dreams were filled with images of that doll, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The following day, I decided to investigate. I stepped outside to find the dumpster empty, save for a few scattered scraps of paper. Confused, I felt a chill run through me. Had someone taken the doll? Or had it moved on its own? The thought unsettled me, but I brushed it aside, convincing myself it was merely a figment of my overactive imagination. Days passed, and I tried to forget about the doll, but it lingered in my mind like a dark cloud. Then, one night, as I peered out my window, I saw it, sitting on the edge of the dumpster once more, as if waiting for me. My heart raced. It had been a week since I first found it, and yet, there it was, defiantly returning to the same spot. I couldn't believe it. I was certain someone was playing a prank on me, perhaps a neighbor with a twisted sense of humor. But as I glanced closer, I noticed something alarming. The doll's position had shifted, now facing my window. It was as if it were aware of me, its empty gaze piercing through the darkness. I backed away from the window, my pulse quickening. The shadows in my room seemed to deepen, and the familiar sounds of the night morphed into a cacophony of whispers. My heart pounded against my chest. I could almost hear it, the faint sound of giggles echoing from the alley below. In the following nights, the doll continued to move. Each morning, it would appear closer to my window, its grin widening as if it took pleasure in my growing dread. I began to dread falling asleep, fearing what the night would bring. The apartment, once a sanctuary, felt like a prison. I found myself peering through the curtains, half expecting to see the doll staring back at me. One evening, in a fit of frustration and fear, I decided to confront the mystery. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way outside, heart thumping in my chest. The cold air bit at my skin, but I pressed on, determined to discover the truth. As I reached the dumpster, the shadows danced ominously around me. My breath quickened. And there it was, the doll, nestled among the garbage, its expression unchanged. But as I shone the flashlight on it, something shifted in my gut. It felt as though the air grew thick with anticipation. I approached slowly, my heart racing, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. My heart dropped into my stomach as the sound of footsteps echoed in the darkness. They were soft yet deliberate, sending waves of terror coursing through my veins. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the shadows, illuminating nothing but the empty alleyway and the crumbling bricks of the nearby building. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. Silence swallowed my words. I turned back to the doll, feeling an almost magnetic pull, as if it were urging me to stay. But instinct screamed at me to leave. I took a step back, preparing to run, when a whispering breeze brushed past me, and I felt an icy chill crawl up my spine. The footsteps resumed, but this time they were closer, almost beside me. Panic surged within me, and I dashed back toward my apartment, fear propelling me forward. I could hear the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of laughter, but I couldn't pinpoint the source. It was as if the night itself was alive, taunting me with its eerie symphony. Bursting through my front door, I slammed it shut and locked it, pressing my back against the wood as if that could somehow shield me from the unseen presence. My breathing was ragged as I leaned against the wall, eyes darting around the room. The familiar comfort of my apartment felt foreign now, each corner shrouded in shadows. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling, and scrolled through my contacts, contemplating calling someone. But who would believe me? Who would care about a doll that moved on its own? The laughter echoed in my mind, mingling with the unsettling whispers. I needed to be rational, to convince myself it was just my imagination. But as the hours ticked by, the paranoia only deepened. I turned on every light in my apartment, illuminating every dark corner, but still, the unease lingered. I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of giggling from outside my window. It was playful, innocent, but also unnervingly sinister. That night, I barely slept, eyes glued to the window. Each time a car passed, or a branch tapped against the glass, my heart would leap in my chest. At one point, I dared to peek outside, only to find the street empty, the doll nowhere in sight. As dawn broke, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps it was just a bad dream. I decided to confront the doll once and for all. It was time to take control of this situation. After a long day of work, I returned home, determined to face the source of my fear. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ground, I made my way to the dumpster. I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. I had to see it again, to confront whatever dark force it represented. When I arrived, my heart sank. The doll was gone. I searched the area, peering into the dumpster and around the alley, my hands trembling with anxiety. It was as if it had never existed. Just when I thought I was free, I turned to leave and caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. There, standing in the shadows at the far end of the alley, was a figure, a silhouette, indistinct and wavering, but unmistakably human. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. As I stepped closer, the figure dissolved into darkness, vanishing like smoke in the night. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice echoing against the brick walls. "Who's there?" But there was no answer. Only silence. I backed away slowly, my heart racing. My rational mind screamed for me to dismiss it, but deep down, I felt an inescapable connection to that shadow. It was as if it was inviting me to follow. I turned to leave, my feet moving faster than my mind could process. As I reached the end of the alley, I heard it again, the sound of laughter, now clearer, more distinct. It was a child's laughter, filled with delight but laced with something darker. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events over and over. I thought of the doll, the footsteps, the figure in the shadows. Was it all just a trick of my mind, or was something truly sinister lurking just beyond my view? My stomach churned with dread as I finally succumbed to sleep, unaware of the true horror that awaited me. The next day would be a reckoning. Morning arrived, but sleep had offered me no solace. I awoke to the sun streaming through my window, illuminating the room with an almost comforting glow. Yet, the remnants of last night's terror clung to me like a heavy blanket. I forced myself to get out of bed, determined to regain control of my life. I had to know more about the doll. There had to be an explanation for its eerie behavior. Perhaps it was just an elaborate prank or a psychological game being played by someone in the neighborhood. I made my way to the local library, hoping to find some answers. The musty smell of old books enveloped me as I entered. I scoured the shelves, looking for anything related to haunted dolls or local legends. Hours passed as I flipped through pages, uncovering tales of childhood fears and strange happenings, but nothing concrete. Just as I was about to give up, I stumbled upon an old newspaper article. The headline read, "Mysterious Disappearances Linked to Haunted Doll." My pulse quickened as I read the details. Children had gone missing in the area, their last known whereabouts often traced back to sightings of a peculiar doll. The article described the doll as having the ability to manipulate its surroundings, drawing children in with its charm before vanishing them into thin air. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could it be the same doll? I quickly noted the date of the article and decided to return home, the weight of the past pressing heavily on my shoulders. That evening, the shadows crept into my apartment once more. As dusk fell, I felt an overwhelming urge to check the dumpster again. I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers I saw were waiting for me there. Armed with a flashlight, I stepped outside, the cool air biting at my skin. Each step toward the alley felt like walking into a trap, but curiosity propelled me forward. As I approached the dumpster, my heart raced. The area was quiet, almost too quiet. I shined my flashlight inside, but it was empty. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard the unmistakable sound of giggling again, echoing from somewhere deeper in the alley. I hesitated, fear battling my curiosity. The laughter was sweet, inviting, yet it chilled me to the bone. I turned the corner, following the sound, which grew louder and more insistent. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a small group of children gathered in a circle, their eyes wide with wonder. In the center of the group sat the doll, propped up against the wall, smiling its sinister smile. The children seemed entranced, their laughter ringing out like a haunting melody. "Look!" It moved again, one of them exclaimed, pointing at the doll. "Can we play with it?" Another chimed in, their excitement palpable. Panic surged through me. I couldn't let them play with it. I stepped forward, calling out, "Hey! You shouldn't be here. That doll isn't safe." The children turned to me, their faces transforming from delight to confusion. They didn't seem scared. Instead, they looked at me as if I were the intruder. The doll's eyes glimmered in the darkness, and I felt its gaze piercing through me, as if it were assessing my every move. "Go home!" I shouted, my voice rising in urgency. The children began to disperse, but one girl lingered, her expression oddly calm. "Don't worry," she said softly, "she just wants to play." Before I could respond, she turned and ran off, joining the others. I felt a surge of dread wash over me. The doll was no ordinary toy. It was a vessel for something dark, something that thrived on fear and innocence. I approached the doll, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. As I reached out to grab it, a cold breeze swept through the alley, and I felt a sudden shift in the air. It was as if the shadows were alive, swirling around me, taunting me with whispers of the past. The doll's smile seemed to widen, and I recoiled, feeling as if it had reached out to ensnare me. I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment I did, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me again, louder and closer than ever before. I bolted back toward my apartment, adrenaline fueling my every step. But the laughter followed me, echoing in my ears as I fumbled with my keys at the door. The shadows seemed to stretch and grow, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. Finally, I managed to get inside and slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. I leaned against it, gasping for breath, the laughter still ringing in my mind. I had to end this once and for all. I had to confront whatever dark force the doll embodied. That night, as I lay in bed, I formulated a plan. I would return to the alley, not to run away, but to face the doll and whatever it represented. I had to reclaim my life from this haunting presence, even if it meant uncovering the darkest truths hidden within that innocent facade. The next night, I felt an electric charge in the air, as if the world was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. I spent the day preparing, gathering my thoughts and steeling my nerves. I didn't know what I would face, but I knew I had to confront the doll and the malevolent energy that surrounded it. As darkness fell, I donned a warm jacket and grabbed my flashlight. I felt an unusual sense of determination coursing through me. This time, I wouldn't let fear dictate my actions. I walked to the alley, the cool night air nipping at my skin, every sound amplifying the tension in my chest. When I reached the dumpster, I paused, scanning the shadows. The alley was still, and for a brief moment, I wondered if I had imagined the previous encounters. But then I caught sight of it, the doll, sitting in the same spot as before, its glassy eyes glinting in the dim light. "Show yourself," I called out, my voice steady but laced with tension. "I know you're there." As if in response, the laughter rang out once more, echoing off the brick walls, this time a chorus of childlike voices blending together in a haunting melody. I shone my flashlight toward the sound, heart racing. The children materialized from the shadows, their expressions vacant, as if they were in a trance. "Play with us," one of the children said, their voice eerily monotone. "The doll wants you to join." "No," I shouted, taking a step back. "You don't understand. It's dangerous." The doll seemed to shimmer in the light, its smile twisting into something grotesque. I felt the air grow heavy, an unseen force pressing down on me, trying to pull me into its depths. I could sense the energy shifting, a palpable darkness creeping closer. Suddenly, the children began to chant, their voices rising in an otherworldly chorus. "Join us! Join us! Join us!" The rhythm of their words thrummed in my chest, drowning out my thoughts and filling me with dread. I shook my head, trying to break free from their spell. "No! I won't be a part of this." I took a deep breath and focused all my strength on the doll. "You have no power over me." As I spoke, the chanting grew louder, almost deafening. I felt the ground beneath me tremble, and a gust of wind swept through the alley, swirling around the children and the doll. I pushed forward, my resolve hardening. I approached the doll, my heart pounding, and reached out. "I won't let you take anyone else." I grabbed the doll by its arm, and as I did, an electric shock coursed through my body. The laughter turned to screams, a cacophony of horror echoing through the night. The children began to fade, their faces twisting in pain, the joy gone from their eyes. The doll's smile morphed into a scowl, and I felt the darkness lash out at me, tendrils of shadow wrapping around my wrists. "Let go," it seemed to scream, the very air around us vibrating with its fury. I tightened my grip, fighting against the pull of the shadows. "You're not real. You're just a doll," I shouted, pouring every ounce of my willpower into my words. With one final surge, I yanked the doll free, and as I did, the air erupted with a piercing shriek. The shadows recoiled, twisting and writhing in fury before dissipating into the night. The children vanished, their laughter replaced with an eerie silence. Breathless, I stared at the doll in my hands. It felt lighter now, as if the malevolent energy had been stripped away. The sinister grin had faded, leaving behind an expression of eerie innocence. But my victory was short-lived. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a shadow darting through the alley, moving with unnatural speed. My heart sank as I realized it wasn't over yet. Whatever force had possessed the doll was still lurking, waiting for its chance to reclaim its power. I bolted from the alley, the doll clutched tightly in my arms. I couldn't let it out of my sight, couldn't risk it returning to the dumpster or to the children who had once been ensnared by its charm. As I reached my apartment, I slammed the door behind me and locked it, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. But the darkness still loomed, a reminder of the confrontation I had just endured. I needed to find a way to break this cycle, to rid myself of the doll's lingering influence once and for all. As I sat on the floor, the doll before me, I knew that I had only begun to unravel the mystery. There was more to uncover, and the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it would become. But one thing was certain, I wouldn't let fear control me any longer. I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. And I would make sure that no one else would fall victim to the doll's dark allure. That night, the air was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of the doll's presence pressing down on me like a shroud. I sat on the floor of my living room, staring at it. The once malign figure now seemed almost innocent, but I knew better. This was not just a toy, it was a conduit for something dark, a vessel for the whispers of lost souls. As the clock struck midnight, an uneasy stillness enveloped my apartment. The familiar sounds of the city faded away, replaced by an unsettling silence that sent chills down my spine. I had to act, and I had to do it now. If the doll held any connection to the disappearances I had read about, I needed to confront it head-on. I gathered everything I could think of, a sage bundle to cleanse the space, salt to create a protective circle, and a small knife for the worst-case scenario. My hands trembled as I arranged the items on the floor, the doll lying in the center of the makeshift altar. Once I was satisfied, I lit the sage, the fragrant smoke curling around me. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, focusing on the intention to rid myself of the darkness. "I release you," I whispered, trying to project strength despite the fear swirling in my gut. As the smoke danced in the air, I felt the atmosphere shift. The temperature dropped and shadows flickered along the walls. The doll remained still, its expression unchanged, but I could sense the energy building, a rising tide of malevolence. I opened my eyes, heart pounding, and began to speak. "You think you can control me, don't you? You think I'm afraid of you. But I know your secret." A gust of wind rushed through the room, extinguishing the sage flame and sending the salt scattering. The doll began to vibrate slightly, as if responding to my words. The shadows in the corners of the room thickened, swirling like a storm ready to break. "Show yourself," I commanded, defiance swelling within me. "I'm not afraid of you." For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the depths of the shadows, a figure emerged, vague at first, but growing clearer by the second. It was a girl, no older than 10, her face pale and drawn, eyes wide with fear. She looked familiar. I realized it was one of the children from the alley. "Help me," she cried, reaching out toward me. It's not just the doll. It's all of us. The room pulsed with energy as more figures joined her, appearing in flashes of light and shadow. Children, their faces twisted in anguish, surrounded me. They were lost, trapped in a realm between the living and the dead. No! I shouted, realizing the true horror. The doll was not just a puppet, it had ensnared their spirits, feeding off their fear and loneliness. I will free you. I dropped to my knees, forming a protective circle with the salt around the doll and myself. You will not keep them. I command you to release them. The shadows writhed in protest, the room shaking violently as the figures began to merge into a swirling vortex around the doll. I focused on the light within me, drawing strength from the hope that I could break this cycle. By the power of light, I command you. I shouted, my voice rising above the chaos. You have no hold over them. I break your chains. The shadows recoiled, shrieks of rage echoing through the air. The doll began to crack, fissures forming along its surface, revealing a blinding light that pulsed with every beat of my heart. I could feel the energy shifting, a surge of power coursing through the room. With one final scream, I plunged the knife into the center of the doll, and the room erupted in blinding light. The children's faces twisted in a mixture of fear and relief, and for a moment, everything froze. The light burst forth, enveloping the room and dissolving the shadows into nothingness. I felt a wave of warmth wash over me, the presence of the lost souls filling the space with a sense of peace. As the light faded, the doll crumbled into dust, leaving behind only silence. I collapsed to the floor, panting, the remnants of the darkness finally lifting. The children's spirits shimmered around me, their faces now serene. One by one, they smiled at me before dissolving into the light, finally free. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. The weight of the past had been lifted, and I was no longer haunted by the doll or the darkness it had embodied. I had faced my fears, confronted the malevolent force that had threatened to consume me, and emerged victorious. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the remnants of my battle. I knew I would carry the scars of this experience with me, but I also felt empowered. I had learned that darkness can only thrive in the absence of light, and I had chosen to shine brightly against it. I took a deep breath, feeling a newfound sense of peace settle within me. The nightmare was over, and I was ready to embrace a future free from fear. Have you ever woken up in a cold sweat, heart racing, after a dream that felt too real? I have. It started one ordinary night, the kind when the world around you fades away, and all that remains is the veil of sleep. I drifted into slumber, unaware that I was about to enter a realm that would change everything. In my dream, I found myself standing in a stark white room. The walls were bare, and the floor was smooth, almost blindingly bright. It felt sterile, devoid of color or life. I looked around, trying to make sense of my surroundings, but all I saw was emptiness. It was unsettling, yet oddly peaceful. As I took a step forward, I noticed something in the corner of the room, a small, tattered teddy bear. It looked familiar, and a wave of unease washed over me. This was no ordinary teddy bear. It was the one I had as a child, the one I clung to during storms or when the darkness felt too overwhelming. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding. It lay there, silent and still, but as I reached out to pick it up, a strange sensation crept over me. I felt as if I were being watched, a prickling at the back of my neck that sent shivers down my spine. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls contracting ever so slightly. Suddenly, the bear's button eyes glinted in the harsh light, and I recoiled as a memory flooded back. I remembered the night my parents had argued, the night I had hidden under my bed, clutching that very bear. I had been terrified, the fear palpable, a knot tightening in my stomach. "Why are you here?" I whispered to the bear, as if it held the answers. But there was no response, only the oppressive silence of the room. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just a dream. But as I turned away, I heard a soft rustle behind me, like the sound of fabric brushing against fabric. My breath hitched, and I spun back around, but the room remained unchanged. The bear was still there, motionless. I forced myself to leave, backing away slowly, but the air grew heavier, making each step feel like wading through molasses. The walls seemed to pulse, echoing my anxiety. As I neared the door, a low whisper filled the room, barely audible but chilling nonetheless. "Stay." I froze. The voice was gentle yet insistent, wrapping around me like a fog. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The urge to flee battled against an inexplicable pull toward the whisper. Just then, a shadow flitted across the room, a fleeting glimpse at the edge of my vision. My heart raced as I turned my head, but nothing was there, only the white walls, stark and menacing. Panic surged through me, and I dashed for the door, slamming it behind me as I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat. The sound of my own heartbeat filled my ears, and I sat up, gasping for air. The room around me was familiar and safe, but the remnants of the dream lingered like a dark cloud. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it as just another nightmare. But deep down, I knew it was different. It felt like a warning, a glimpse into something buried within my subconscious. I didn't want to sleep again, but sleep came as it always does, relentless and inescapable. The next night, as I drifted off, I found myself back in that same white room. This time, there was no teddy bear. Instead, a mirror stood against the wall, its surface reflecting only the emptiness around it. What would I see this time? The question hung in the air like a dark omen, and I felt the dread creeping in once more. I took a step closer, drawn by an invisible force, unaware that I was about to uncover more than I ever intended to. The mirror loomed before me, its surface smooth and untouched, yet it felt alive, pulsating with energy. I approached it cautiously, my heart thumping in my chest. The white room, once devoid of any emotion, now felt charged with an undercurrent of fear and anticipation. As I stood before the mirror, I hesitated, unsure of what I would see. My reflection stared back at me, but it was not just my physical form. I could feel an echo of my thoughts, my insecurities swirling around me, making the air thick with tension. The white walls felt like they were closing in again, a reminder that I was trapped in this strange dreamscape. I took a deep breath and leaned closer. At first, my reflection was unchanged, just my wide eyes and tousled hair. But then, the image began to ripple, the surface of the mirror distorting like the surface of a pond disturbed by a sudden wind. I gasped as the reflection morphed into something darker. My face twisted into an expression of anguish, the fear I had buried for so long suddenly palpable. I saw memories flash before me, moments of failure, times I felt inadequate, fears of abandonment. Each one crashed over me like waves, pulling me deeper into despair. "Stop!" I cried, backing away, but the mirror pulled me in, refusing to let go. The whispers returned, but this time they were clearer, more insistent. "You cannot hide. You must face the truth." Suddenly, the mirror began to darken, the white room flickering like a faulty light bulb. I saw shadows creeping in from the corners, like tendrils of smoke reaching for me. My breath quickened and panic surged anew. I could feel the oppressive weight of my fears pressing down on me, threatening to suffocate me. Face it. The voice echoed again, this time more commanding. The shadows swirled around, forming shapes that loomed large in the dim light. I recognized them, the people from my past whose opinions I valued most. Their faces were twisted in disappointment, their eyes filled with judgment. No! This isn't real. I shouted, but deep down, I knew the truth. I had always worried about what others thought of me, how they would perceive my choices, my life. The fear of not being enough had haunted me for years, and now it had manifested into this terrifying experience. The room shook violently, and I stumbled back, feeling dizzy. My reflection in the mirror twisted again, this time showing a scene I had long tried to forget, a failed project, a confrontation, a moment of vulnerability when I had been ridiculed. Each scene felt like a dagger, piercing through my defenses. As the shadows encroached, I realized I had to confront this fear head-on. I stepped back toward the mirror, a mix of terror and determination coursing through me. I will not let you control me, I declared, feeling a surge of strength rising within me. I am more than my failures. The shadows hesitated, swirling as if confused. I focused on the positive moments, the times I had triumphed despite the odds, the love I had received from friends and family. I summoned these memories, allowing them to flood my mind, brightening the darkness. With each positive thought, the shadows began to recede, the twisted faces losing their menacing power. The mirror shimmered, and for a brief moment, I saw my true self reflected back, a version of me that was strong, resilient, and deserving of love. But just as I felt a glimmer of hope, the mirror shattered, shards scattering across the floor like broken promises. I stumbled back, and the shadows lunged at me, their grasp tightening around my throat, silencing my voice. I gasped for breath, feeling the fear trying to choke me. No! I won't give in. I shouted, summoning every ounce of willpower. I focused on the light, the love, the strength I had seen moments before. I would not be defined by my fears. With a final cry, I pushed back against the darkness, and to my surprise, the shadows shrank back, disintegrating into wisps of smoke. I felt a rush of energy course through me as the white room around me began to dissolve, fading into bright light. In that moment, I understood what the room was trying to teach me, that my fears were not insurmountable, but rather challenges to overcome. The journey was far from over, but I felt empowered to face whatever came next. As the light enveloped me, I woke up in my bed, breathless yet invigorated. I realized I was no longer just a passive participant in my dreams, I had the power to change them. But the white room would return, I was sure of that. What would it reveal to me next? And would I be ready for it? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but this time I welcomed it. The next night, I lay in bed, heart racing with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. I knew I would return to the white room, and part of me was eager to see what it would reveal. Would I face another fear, or perhaps discover something new about myself? I closed my eyes, allowing sleep to pull me under, the darkness wrapping around me like a familiar blanket. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the white room, the walls gleaming under a harsh, artificial light. The stillness was almost oppressive, and for a moment, I felt the familiar wave of unease wash over me. But this time, I was determined to face whatever awaited me. Scanning the room, I noticed that something was different. The air felt charged, buzzing with a strange energy. And there, in the center of the room, lay a small wooden box. It was ornately carved, the patterns swirling across its surface as if alive. My heart raced. I could feel the pull of curiosity mixed with an underlying dread. As I approached the box, I could hear a faint ticking sound, rhythmic and persistent. The sound seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat, each tick echoing in the silence. My fingers brushed against the smooth surface of the box, and a wave of memories flooded my mind. I recognized it. It was a music box I had as a child, the one my grandmother had given me. Tentatively, I lifted the lid. The ticking stopped, replaced by a soft, melancholic tune. As the music played, I felt transported back to my childhood, a time when life was simpler, but also fraught with its own fears. I could see my grandmother's face, her warm smile and comforting presence, but then her image flickered, and I remembered the day she passed. The room grew darker, shadows creeping in as the tune played on. I felt the familiar knot in my stomach tighten, an ache for the loss that still haunted me. The shadows twisted and turned, whispering words of regret and sorrow. "You didn't save her," they hissed, the voices blending into a cacophony of grief. "Stop!" I shouted, trying to drown out their taunts. I did everything I could. But the memories surged, each moment of helplessness crashing over me like a relentless wave. The music intensified, and the shadows grew bolder, taking on the forms of my regrets, each one more tangible than the last. As I faced the swirling darkness, I felt the weight of guilt pressing down on me. I had always blamed myself for her passing, convinced that I could have done something differently. The pain had been a constant companion, a shadow that lurked just beyond my reach. But as the tune continued, something shifted within me. I remembered her laughter, the way she would always encourage me to embrace life, to chase my dreams. "Don't dwell on what you cannot change," she would say. "Focus on the love we shared." With that thought in mind, I steeled myself against the encroaching shadows. "I loved her," I declared, my voice echoing against the stark walls. "And that love is still with me." The music swelled, filling the room with warmth. The shadows hesitated, flickering as if unsure of themselves. I took a step forward, my heart racing, and reached out toward the darkness. "You don't owe me. I will not let you take her memory from me." The shadows shrieked in protest, swirling violently as the music reached a crescendo. I closed my eyes, focusing on the love I felt for my grandmother, allowing it to wash over me like a protective shield. In that moment, the music box erupted with a burst of light, illuminating the room and banishing the darkness. The shadows dissipated, their hold on me broken. The melody filled the air, resonating with every beat of my heart. When the light faded, the room was once again calm and bright. The music box lay closed at my feet, its tune silenced but the memory of its song still echoing in my mind. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I knew I had faced another fear, another shadow of my past, and emerged stronger. As I looked around the white room, I realized that it was not just a prison for my nightmares. It was also a space for healing, a place where I could confront the things that haunted me. But I also understood that the room would continue to challenge me, to bring forth new fears I had yet to face. And so, as I drifted awake in my bed, I felt a mix of trepidation and determination. I was ready to embrace whatever the white room had in store for me next. The following night, as I settled into bed, an unsettling anticipation coursed through me. I knew that the white room would reveal another layer of my subconscious, another fear waiting to be faced. I closed my eyes, and soon enough, the familiar sensation of drifting enveloped me. Once again, I found myself standing in the white room, but this time, the atmosphere was different. It felt charged, electric, as if the very walls were alive with energy. I looked around, my heart pounding, and noticed a door that had not been there before. It stood ajar, a faint light spilling out from the crack, beckoning me closer. Compelled by curiosity and an underlying sense of dread, I approached the door. The air around me shifted, thick with tension. I could hear faint whispers emanating from the other side, a blend of familiar voices mixed with unknown tones. Each sound sent a shiver down my spine. "Do you dare?" one voice whispered, low and taunting. "Do you truly wish to know what lies beyond?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to retreat, to ignore the door and its promises of knowledge. But the other part, the part that had faced fear before, pushed me forward. I took a deep breath and stepped through the door. The moment I crossed the threshold, the light engulfed me, and I found myself in a different realm altogether. The room was no longer stark white. Instead, it was filled with colors, bright and chaotic. Walls of swirling hues surrounded me, and the ground felt soft beneath my feet, almost like walking on clouds. In the center of this vibrant space stood a pedestal with a small, ornate box resting on it. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a tempest. "Open it," they urged, their voices a mix of encouragement and menace. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer to the pedestal. My heart raced as I reached out, fingers trembling as I touched the cool surface of the box. It felt alive, pulsating with energy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it contained something significant. I lifted the lid, and a rush of wind swept through the room, knocking me back a step. Inside the box lay a mirror, much like the one I had faced before, but this one was different. The surface shimmered with a kaleidoscope of colors, reflecting not just my image but fragments of my past, the good and the bad. As I gazed into the mirror, memories flooded my mind, moments of joy and triumph mixed with times of despair and heartache. I saw my childhood friends, the laughter we shared, the secrets we kept. But then, shadows began to creep in, images of lost friendships, arguments, and betrayals. The weight of regret hung heavy in the air. "Look closer," the voices urged, now almost pleading. "What do you see?" I leaned in, forcing myself to confront the memories that haunted me. I saw faces of those I had let down, moments when I had chosen fear over connection. Each reflection felt like a dagger, twisting in my heart. "No," I whispered, fighting back tears. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." "Do you not see?" the voices cried, echoing through the colorful realm. "Your fear of abandonment has driven them away." The room spun, the vibrant colors blurring as the shadows loomed larger, drowning out the light. I felt the suffocating weight of loneliness pressing down on me, memories colliding in a chaotic whirlwind. I stumbled back, the pedestal tilting beneath me. "No! I won't let this define me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I have the power to change." With that declaration, I focused on the positive memories, the connections that mattered. I thought of my friends who still stood by me, the love I had cultivated over the years. I summoned the strength I had found in facing my past fears, allowing it to fill me. As I channeled that energy, the colors around me began to swirl and brighten, pushing back the shadows. "You are not your fears," I yelled, clenching my fists. "I choose to embrace love, not loss." The mirror began to glow, illuminating the room with a brilliant light. The shadows shrieked in protest, retreating into the corners as the vibrancy surged around me. The whispers transformed into a chorus of encouragement, lifting me higher. With one final push, the mirror shattered into a million pieces, each shard reflecting a moment of love, joy, and resilience. The light enveloped me, banishing the darkness completely. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my bed, heart racing but filled with a sense of clarity. I had faced yet another fear, my fear of losing those I loved due to my insecurities, and emerged stronger. The room had shown me that while my past was a part of me, it did not have to dictate my future. As I lay in the comfort of my own space, I knew that the white room would return. It was not a place of despair, but a gateway to understanding and healing. I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension for what lay ahead. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to embrace it. The night came again, and I braced myself for what awaited me in the white room. I felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. Each journey had uncovered more about my fears, but I knew there was still something lurking in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself back in the familiar, stark white room. The walls seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow, and I could feel an intense energy in the air. But this time, I sensed that something was different, something significant was about to unfold. In the center of the room stood a large, imposing door, far more elaborate than the one I had encountered before. It was made of dark wood, intricately carved with symbols I couldn't quite decipher. I approached cautiously, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Open it," a voice whispered, familiar yet haunting. It was the same voice that had guided me through my previous challenges. I hesitated, my heart pounding. What lay behind this door? Was I ready to face it? Taking a deep breath, I grasped the cold handle and pulled it open. The door creaked, revealing a darkened corridor beyond. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, and I could barely make out the edges of the room. With each step I took, the atmosphere grew heavier, filled with an almost tangible dread. As I walked deeper into the corridor, the shadows began to twist and turn, forming shapes that danced just out of reach. I felt the cold grip of fear tightening around me, but I pressed on, determined to confront whatever awaited me. At the end of the corridor, I found another door. This one was slightly ajar, flickering light spilling through the gap. I pushed it open, stepping into a vast, dimly lit room that seemed to pulse with energy. The walls were lined with mirrors, each reflecting different versions of myself. Some reflections showed me as a child, full of innocence and hope. Others depicted moments of pain and regret, each one representing a fear I had yet to confront. I felt overwhelmed, the weight of my past pressing down on me. In the center of the room stood a figure cloaked in shadow, indistinct yet commanding. I felt a chill run down my spine as it turned to face me. "Welcome," it said, its voice a low rumble. "You have journeyed far, but now you must face your greatest fear." "What is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking. The figure gestured to the mirrors around me. "It is you," it replied. "You fear the truth of who you are, the weight of your past, and the uncertainty of your future." I swallowed hard, the realization washing over me like a cold wave. I had spent so long running from my fears, hiding behind masks and illusions. "I'm not afraid of the truth," I shouted, though a part of me trembled at the thought of facing everything I had buried. The figure stepped closer, its form shifting like smoke. "Then prove it. Look into the mirrors and confront what you see. Only then can you break free." I steeled myself and approached the nearest mirror. As I gazed into it, I saw a version of myself paralyzed by self-doubt, a reflection filled with tears and frustration. "This is not who I am," I cried, but the reflection remained unchanged. "Isn't it?" the figure whispered. "Isn't this what you fear?" I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. I refuse to accept this. I have grown, I have changed. With a surge of determination, I turned my focus inward, allowing myself to remember the moments of strength, resilience, and love I had experienced. I took a step back from the mirror, allowing the memories to swirl around me. As I focused on the light within, the reflection began to shift. The sadness faded, replaced by strength and hope. I saw the version of myself that had fought through adversity, that had learned to embrace love and connection. The figure's shadow flickered, but it stood its ground. Look deeper, it commanded. I approached another mirror, this time seeing the face of someone paralyzed by the fear of failure. I felt the weight of that fear pressing down on me, but I recalled the victories I had achieved, the risks I had taken despite the odds. I am more than my failures. I shouted, and the reflection began to shimmer. One by one, I faced each mirror, confronting the darkest parts of myself, fear, regret, anger, allowing the light of my experiences to transform them. With each reflection I accepted, the shadows around the figure began to dissipate, the room growing brighter. Finally, I stood before the last mirror, the one that reflected my deepest fear, the fear of being alone. My heart ached at the thought, memories of loss flooding my mind. But I remembered the love that surrounded me, the connections I had nurtured, and the friendships that still thrived. I will not be defined by fear, I declared. With that, the last of the shadows evaporated, and the figure before me transformed, losing its menacing form. You have faced yourself, it said, its voice now softer. You are stronger than your fears. The mirrors faded away, and the room filled with blinding light. I felt a rush of energy, a sense of liberation as I embraced my true self, flaws and all. The white room had become a sanctuary, a place of healing and growth. When the light dimmed, I found myself back in the original white room. I stood tall, a sense of peace washing over me. I had faced my greatest fears and emerged stronger. As I awoke in my bed, the first rays of dawn breaking through my window, I felt ready for whatever came next. The white room had shown me the path to healing, and though the journey was ongoing, I was no longer afraid to walk it. Each dream would bring its own challenges, but now I understood that I had the strength to confront them all. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.